Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape, Patricia August is accused of the theft of over 1 million rand from the crime intelligence officers in the city and obstructing justice. The state says August staged a robbery scene after a man allegedly gained access to her office, pulled out a firearm and demanded money. August allegedly complied and the man left with the cash. NPA regional spokesperson Luxolo Kyali.
The police captain, Ntombekaya Patricia August, who is charged in relation to the daring robbery at the East London Crime Intelligence Office, has been granted a 4,000 rand bail by the East London Magistrate Court. She is expected to appear in court again on the 4th of March 2025 for further investigations.
The Public Works and Infrastructure Department in Pretoria has raised concerns about the rampant destruction of its infrastructure. This includes the theft of aluminium, cables, as well as damage to traffic lights and railway lines. The department spokesperson Lennox Mabaso.
The department cannot rule out the possibility of these criminal thugs being organized and also being linked to some syndicate that is involved in selling the scrap metal to dealers for cash. The department continues to raise concern at the flourishing scrap metal industry and its relationship with material acquired through theft, which impact the economy and the critical infrastructure.
The U.S. Defense Department is sending 1,500 more troops to the Mexican border as the Trump administration cracks down on immigration. The U.S. military will also assist with deportation flights for thousands of immigrants already in detention. Yesterday, more than 10,000 people already approved for refugee status, including Afghans who worked for American forces, were told they could not, after all, enter the U.S. Masiho Fulad, head of the California Immigrant Policy Center, says the U.S. is breaking a promise it made to people hoping to claim asylum.
It's classic Trump playbook of really demonizing people who are seeking safety and refuge and asylum. There have been over 1,500 Afghans who have had their flights canceled. These are individuals that 20 years ago we promised them that we would keep them safe and that we would provide a home for them if that came to be. And now the country is going back on its promise.
Recapping the top story, Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources Gwede Mantashe says illegal mining is a war on the economy. He was speaking during a media briefing in Pretoria on the mine's health and safety statistics for 2024. I am on Delambada for SFM News Headlines at 3:30.
And coming up in your sports this hour, Coca-Cola and SA Rugby enter into a new partnership. Jamaica wins series, but Nebo Proteas hold heads high, and Sabalenka in Australian Open final for the third successive time. More details at 3:30.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.7 FM in Cape Town. SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
Right, you need to make a note of this. You know it's January and it's a time to save money, and there's many ways to do that. Now, you could cut back on the milk in your cereal. It's an option. Or you could switch to Outsurance and save on your car insurance premium. Get a quote, and if Outsurance can't beat your car insurance premium, ask them for 500 rands in cash. And you can make that 1,500 rands in cash if you've been claim-free and with the same insurer for 3 years. So what do you need to do? SMS OUT to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP, T's and C's available online.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
And it certainly is the National Pulse, and I wonder what you think would be the biggest issues driving the National Pulse today. There's an e-hailing strike. Uber and Bolt drivers in the Gauteng region. That's not all. There are many, many other issues. We'll chat to Yumna Al-Said, who is, in fact, an Al Jazeera correspondent who's covered the issues in the Gaza Strip extensively. We'll talk to her about, life in that region 4 days after that ceasefire. Families of apartheid victims are to sue the government over apartheid atrocities. What a big issue that is, right? And Mark Barnes, remember him, the former CEO of the Post Office? Well, he's going to talk to us about this, saying, forget degrees, put supply and demand first. That's not all. There's also been an attack on the Western Cape Education Department. Dr. Seela Naidu has said that data analysis shows only schools from poor areas have lost contract teachers in that region. So we'll cover all of that and so much more, of course, right? 086 000 2032 is the number to dial in or to call in, and then you have the option to WhatsApp, and you can text or you can voice note me 0614 104 107. But right away, even before I take your calls, you can immediately go onto social media, especially the X platform, and then you can tweet us. Just tweet your thoughts on some of the biggest issues that moves the National Pulse today. Tag SFM Radio, tag me, Ashraf Garda. Do use the hashtag the National Pulse. Okay, let's then get to a big issue. E-hailing taxi operators are currently protesting in Pretoria, in particular, over operating permits and the impounding of vehicles. So what exactly is that story, and what do they hope to achieve by effectively protesting? Let's find out about it with Melithemba Nguni, who's the Secretary General for the E-hailing Partners Council. Melithemba, thanks for connecting to us on the National Pulse.
Thank you, Ashraf, and good afternoon to the listeners.
Okay, so you're protesting. Why?
We're protesting against the impoundments that are currently taking place, that are having an impact on ourselves economically. We are asking them to be stopped because we find them to be unjust. We are pro-compliance. We've been applying for these operating permits. Unfortunately, the department does not have the infrastructure to process these operating licenses. You would take note that about 4 or 5 years ago, they implemented a moratorium in which they said they wanted to address the backlog that they were having. For a year, they could not address it. They extended with 6 months. Again, with that 6 months, they could not. And as we speak to you right now, they have imposed another one in which operators are applying, but they cannot be processed because of another moratorium, which is a result of lack of systems on their side. And now they are allowing the law enforcement to continue with the impoundments. We find this to be very unjust.
So let's understand this. To be an e-hailing driver, Uber, Bolt, and maybe many others too, right? Of course, you need to have a driver's license. You need to have a car. That is a given, stating the obvious. You talk about a specific permit. What permit is that? I mean, what does that permit allow you to do?
So you need to have two things. What you've mentioned, it's for the driver, the compliance of the driver. But then there is also the compliance for the vehicle, which you must have an operator card. And then beyond an operator card, you must have an operating license, the permit that is currently being enforced in terms of these impoundments. The operator card you get from your transport department, similar to the vehicle certification. However, it is more stringent than your normal because this is a transport car. Then beyond that, your operating license, that's what you get from the transport department. whereby you apply to say you're going to be offering these services from this area to this area, and then you are granted such a permit.
Okay, so you speak about this backlog. I mean, so of course the permit is very important, and I mean, in a country where we want people to be employed rather than unemployed, because it's such a big deal, any backlog really impacts on your productivity, right? Is there an explanation why there's such a backlog and a growing backlog at that?
Yes, there is an explanation. Look at the amendment from 2009. The system was set up for to have provincial and local regulatory entities, and also the transport plans. Those are the ones that process these permits. But interestingly, they've never had these in place. Hence, they are not able to process these operating licenses. And mind you, when we make these applications, we do pay. You pay 600 rand for this application. So there shouldn't be an excuse in terms of saying that we don't have the money when the applicants are paying. So there should not be an issue of administration.
Okay, so I take it, I mean, the protest obviously, I would think twofold. One is to create awareness, which you clearly have done, and then, to put it this way, to ensure that the office that is supposed to issue these licenses do not delay you, because by delaying you, they are taking you for a ride, so to speak.
Yes, they definitely have to get their house in order. This is what we've been requesting over the years. It's unfortunately. And as I speak to you, the current MEC introduced a crisis committee, which was given 60 days, which I think it's coming to lapse, if it has not lapsed yet. But so far, we're not even part of the crisis committee, but they're supposed to be consulting with us as the operators.
Okay, now the backlog, I understand, stretches over 2 years. So practically, what do you hope to achieve by the protest? I mean, meaning, of course, you want your permit, right? But how are they able to resolve all of that when they have not been able to do so for 2 years?
Just a second. 35645. Sorry, Ashraf.
No, it's fine.
You can repeat that one.
I was saying that considering there's been a backlog for 2 years, and clearly you want your permits, I mean, the organization of the drivers you represent, how are they able to escalate what you need, considering that we already have a 2-year backlog?
We are actually desperate. Like I said, there is a crisis. So you end up not knowing what to do anymore, because we've done everything in our position to try and assist the department. As I speak to you, the E-Hailing Partners Council was configured by the department to assist the department as far as compliance is concerned. But we find ourselves struggling to work with the department. We come up with a lot of solutions, but there is no implementation that makes sure that all these solutions that we're coming with can be implemented and make sure that the industry works.
Okay.
So these are a lot of issues that we are challenged with. And right now, if I tell you about these impoundments, you have to pay 5,000 rands to release your car. And I'm sure you are aware how much e-hailers have been protesting in terms of exploitation that is happening. You don't have such money, you have to borrow, and what if you let your car stays there, you will be owing the bank for installment, and you will be having issues also, because this is a hand-to-mouth job.
Okay.
And there's also issues of stripping, where your car gets stripped while it's there.
So to confirm, they're impounding cars because those drivers don't have permits, so obviously it's a risk to drive the car because they're going to impound it, but if the drivers don't drive the cars, they're out of business effectively, so they're unemployed at that point in time, right? I mean, it's a real conundrum. And I know that your relationship with Uber and Bolt could be very complex in ways that I don't understand. It's not an employer-employee relationship, but clearly this impacts their brand. I see Uber has issued a statement to say it's business as normal. What are they doing to support you?
Unfortunately, they prefer things to be like the way they are. They are very anti-compliance. So, for an example, in other countries, they are regulated. They get a license where they are given the requirements in which they operate. For an example, they shouldn't be taking cars that do not have operating licenses. But interestingly, only here in South Africa, there is no regulations on these app companies. So they do as they please. That's why. So they're taking cars as much as possible. So they want the situation to remain like this. And as much as you are saying they are impacted, they have always overflooded the market for such scenarios whereby even if you take 500 or 1,000 vehicles off the road currently, they won't feel an inch because the market is oversaturated already.
Okay, so you're saying, to confirm, you're saying Uber and Bolt are anti-compliance, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a strong statement to make. Give me an example of why you say that.
They are. So, for an example, one of the issues, so if you followed the Uber leaks, you'd understand that their business model is mainly anchored on exploitation, which it gets exposed within their executives themselves as a business model. So for an example, they don't want, because if you are going to have vehicles that are having operating licenses, it then assigns value to the vehicles. They don't want vehicles to have value. They don't want drivers to have value. So it is a situation where it's in and out. So they are kicking drivers at any time. They are kicking vehicles at any time. That's why they don't have an explanation to anyone whenever they want to check out a vehicle. So they are very anti-regulations. And that's why we believe that they have not been regulated, despite us for the past 8 years been asking the government to regulate them. But there has not been an effort towards regulation.
All right. Lastly, how long will this protest continue?
So it's only for today, and then we'll wait for the response for the memorandums that have been submitted.
Okay, that's where we will leave it. Melithemba Mnguni, lots to consider from that conversation. Secretary General of the E-Hailing Partners Council, and as someone who's just used an Uber today, I'm just wondering whether I'm going to get a ride back home, isn't it? I mean, it impacts every one of us. Thanks for your time. Well, I tell you what about you? Any thoughts on that? Let's get your quick thoughts and get a sense of what your pulse is telling you regarding e-hailing and these permits that are not being distributed, which means these drivers then get impounded, or the cars get impounded as well. Think about that. We'll talk to Yumna Al Said regarding the ceasefire 4 days later, coming up next.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Owning a small or medium-sized business takes courage, skill, and determination. The Clientele Legal Business Plan is there to protect, guide, and assist your business in managing the legal risks. Let us handle your labor matters, employment contracts, CCMA referrals, and so much more. Our team of professional lawyers are standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 42770. That's SAFM to 42770. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Okay, there's naturally been so much conversation around the ceasefire in the Middle East. I'm talking specifically Israel and Hamas in Palestine. And it's not just in that region, of course. It's very much part of the global agenda in terms of what the politicians of the world have to say, be it Donald Trump or be it what goes on at the WF in Davos as well. So let's get the thoughts then of Yumna Al Said. I mean, she's done some work for Al Jazeera. She's a Gaza Strip correspondent. And we thought, let's talk about what's happened, the impact of the ceasefire 4 days after in fact, it's 5 days now, I think, of the ceasefire, right? So, Yumna, good chatting to you once again. Thanks for connecting to us on the National Pulse. Yumna, do we have you there? Right, let's see if we can... Okay, we'll try and sort that out in just a moment. Let me just tell you, I mean, that issue of the of the Uber drivers is so complex. I tell you what, we need to have a conversation about e-hailing, not just Ubers, I mean e-hailing and how it works and the way it works in different ways, and the relationship between the Department of Transport, maybe Trade and Industry, the e-hailing drivers, as well as Uber and Bolt and others. I really want to get a real good explainer on all of that. Okay, Yumna Al Said, I think, is with us. Yumna, good to connect with you once again.
Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you for having me on your show again.
Much appreciated. So let me ask you this. I mean, I know you've done most of your work in Palestine. At the time of the initial attacks by Hamas on the Israelis, and then the reprisals, you then had to obviously fear for your safety and your life, and you had to move to Egypt. Are you still in Egypt, right?
Yes, I'm still in exile in Cairo.
Okay. So what do you know about life in that region now, a few days after the ceasefire?
Well, of course, Ashraf, this ceasefire comes after 15 months. That's like an enormous time for people to witness and to go through a genocide by the literal meaning of the word, ongoing bombardment that are non-stop, relentless bombs falling on the civilians, starvation, killing children, the thirst, the lack of medication, medical attention, the complete closure of the Gaza Strip on its civilians with no humanitarian aid coming in. All these immense, indescribable conditions and circumstances that the people in Gaza had to go through for 471 days. And then there is finally a ceasefire. People went out in the street. They were very happy. They had a lot of mixed feeling. And I know that the people that were in the street, that were happy, they were chanting, they were celebrating their sense, or the sense of safety and security for the first time in 15 months. Mm-hmm. This is what they were celebrating. But this happiness comes combined with a lot of sorrow, a lot of grief, because at the end, when we just look back at these 15 months, there is no one person in Gaza who has not lost a loved one, who has not had someone of his family injured, who has not lost a home completely or even partially. So I mean, it's a devastation and despair.
So, you raise an interesting point, and of course, often we've spoken, and I've certainly spoken about the fact that the problem didn't start in October 27th. In fact, it started in 1917. But I'm not going there today because there's no time for that, excepting there seems to be a tit for tat. So as you find the situation now, meaning there are casualties on both sides, when you find a situation now, on the one hand, you see these hostages now returning home, and you see families hugging them. I mean, there is a human story to each one of them, but similarly there's a human story to the survivors on the Palestinian side, those who are living, and of course there's a human story to those who have died. Do you think therefore there's a responsibility on the world, I mean I'm talking of the media and others, to effectively document and amplify the human story in that region?
Of course, because first of all, Ashraf, it's not fair to even compare what has happened to the Palestinian people with what has happened in Israel, or the victims or the attacks in Israel, or to the Israeli people. There is no comparison in any way. The ongoing slaughter that the Palestinians have suffered during all this time is completely incomparable to what has happened in the Israeli side. But also there is a very huge responsibility on international media, especially now, to present exactly the realistic facts of the hostages on both sides. Because do not forget that also Israel has captured hundreds and thousands of Palestinian hostages, and they are hostages because they were kidnapped from the Gaza Strip. They were sent to Israeli prisons. They were tortured, they were beaten, they were starved, they were sexually harassed, and some of them have even been killed in these prisons. They were held with no charge while after 15 months, the first pictures of the Israeli captives that were released 4 days ago, they looked in at least excellent physical health. They did not suffer any injuries. They did not suffer any torture. They did not even suffer of starvation or even lack of food. They were in perfect physical health.
Okay,
I'm
I
not
hear
going
you.
to talk about the trauma.
All right,
I'm not going to talk about the trauma because both sides should be only fair to address the trauma for every human being.
I think that's why, and I'm saying that from both sides, you want to hear their personal stories coming through. But just very quickly to stay with the issue of hostages and prisoners. Now, certainly I think the general media is framing it as hostages on the one side and then prisoners on the other. And if I hear what you're saying clearly, you're saying that's not the way it should be addressed. That's a false narrative.
Of course, that's completely misinformation and disinformation to the public. And people now are so much aware of the reality of what's happening, and they are aware of the misconceptions of international media on how they address these issues and how they report them. And they know how much biased they are when they speak about the Palestinian side. And I'm so glad that I have witnessed this awareness among the people of the world who are now pointing out the bias and the misinformation that is reported by international media, and they're doing the job of other journalists.
All right, now we've seen the pictures all through the last year or so, and people returning to Gaza in Palestine, and that region is completely decimated. So when they return, what do they do? Do you have any idea what do they do next in this rebuilding process when they return to nothing?
Now, first of all, before I answer that question, I'd just like to remind you that the statements by Smotrich, the minister in Israel, the Israeli minister Smotrich, where that he has approved to stay in the government and he has approved to go with this ceasefire agreement, just because he got a promise by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the war will resume after the first phase. So after the hostages or Israeli captives are released, while international media has not even addressed that, that is just very clear breaching to an agreement that 3 or 4 international bodies have been working on for several months, and yet nobody has stopped there and said this is a breach.
Okay,
what Palestinians are going to now,
right?
They're going to a lot of destruction.
Okay, I'm afraid we're running out of time, so very, very quickly, we got about 40 seconds to just answer this one, right? So, in the light of all the things you've said now, what's the one thing that you want to see happening next in that region?
I want to see the borders open. I want to see the reconstruction beginning. I want to see more justice for the Palestinian people. And I want those in displaced and in exile to be able to return back to the Gaza Strip without more measures put and imposed on them.
All right. And lastly, very quickly, what about yourself? You certainly spend lots of time reporting from that region. Is that on the agenda for you?
I'm waiting for the border to open, and I'll be the first person to go back to my husband.
Okay, but currently in Cairo, in Egypt, is where Yumna Al-Said is based. She's the Gaza Strip correspondent, in fact, done extensive work for Al Jazeera, and that's what she continues doing. According to her, when the borders open, she'll continue doing her work. Yumna Al-Said, appreciate you giving off your time and your sharing your insights. Let's get the news headlines. It's just gone 3:30 years on Della Mbana.
Thank you, Ashraf. In the news headlines, Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, says illegal mining is a war on the economy. He was speaking during a media briefing in Pretoria on the mine's health and safety statistics for 2024. The South African Democratic Teachers Union in the Western Cape has called for police visibility in schools to ensure the safety of teachers and learners. And as the Israeli military continues an operation in Jenin in the occupied West Bank for a third day, the army says it's killed 2 Palestinian gunmen in a nearby town who carried out a shooting earlier this month. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 northbound has a crash reported at Baklu interchange. All lanes are open, and the M57 in Centurion is closed near St. George's Hotel. In KZN, the N3 eastbound has a stationary truck after Cliffdale exit, and the N2 is queuing on the link to the N3 east at Spaghetti Junction. In Cape Town, the M3 southbound slow moving towards Rhodes Drive, and the N1 inbound slow moving on the elevated freeway. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
Cricket.
This is SAFM Sports with Tumin Khapele.
Right, our very own Minister of Sport. Our other Minister of Sport's been very busy because yesterday the South African Rugby Union lost money. Today they're making some money. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jimmy.
absolutely. A very good afternoon to you. Well, SA Rugby have announced a new 4-year deal with Coca-Cola. The new partnership includes the reigning world champions, the Springboks, as well as the Springbok women, Springbok Sevens men and women, as well as the junior Springbok teams. Now, as part of the new sponsorship, Coca-Cola branding will feature on all the Springbok teams playing shorts, kicking off tomorrow when the Blitzboks take to the field at the HSBC Sevens Perth. Meanwhile, Marcel Coetzee says that he can't wait to tackle the Lions on Saturday, saying that the Bulls are targeting the Jeske Derby as the next step in their trophy hunt this season. Both the Bulls and Lions go into the Ellis Park clash in round 10 of the Vodacom URC with confidence, having claimed convincing European Cup wins last weekend. And just speaking at the Bulls conference on Tuesday, Coetzee emphasized the importance of this week's trip down the M1 to Johannesburg while highlighting the challenge posed by the Lions. In netball, the Spar Proteas lost 59-47 to Jamaica in the second test of the Margaret Beckford Sunshine Netball Series in Kingston. With this win, Jamaica secured the series against the 5th-ranked side, South Africa. And then moving on to football, Kermit Erasmus has joined a Motsepe Foundation Championship side, Keswick Stars. The 34-year-old had been without a club since leaving Pirates last season, and he was linked to sides like Chippa United and City. And training with Cape Town Spurs, however, Keswick Stars secured his signature. In the meantime, former Bloemfontein Celtic midfielder Gideon Noche believes that the possible return of the club into top-flight football in the country's well-known league will basically bode well for people of the area and the Free State province as a whole. Now, Noche made his name at Celtic in the late 90s and early 2000s when late Ntate Petrus Mulumela still owned the club. The club sold its Premier Soccer League status to the troubled Royal AM back in 2021, but they kept the name and their trademarks. And Noche says that should the news of Celtic's return to be true, players in the Free State will definitely benefit.
Even for football talent, I mean, I can just imagine that most of good players or prospective players, whether young or a bit older, I don't know how to put it, but it's very important for them to assist them to be able to play.
Elsewhere, Manchester City announced the acquisition of Egyptian attacker Omar Mamouche on a 4.5-year deal with German outfit Eintracht Frankfurt. It's understood that City paid an initial fee of £59 million plus a further £4.2 million in bonuses. And then in cricket, some of India's top stars, including Rohit Sharma, they're basically struggling in their form on their return to domestic cricket after being forced by the sport's national body to play in home competitions. Now, India's test series against Australia earlier this month prompted the Board of Control for Cricket in India to give new guidelines to promote discipline in the senior men's setup. And some of the rules including limited family time for players on long tours and mandatory participation for India's contracted players in domestic tournaments. But Rohit Sharma, including Shubman Gill and Rishabh Pant, all had poor performances for the teams in the Ranji Trophy, which is India's premier domestic competition. Now, for example, Rohit's first outing for Mumbai in nearly a decade, he was out for 3 in 19 balls, and now some fans even feel like he's doing it on purpose. And it gets me thinking, Ashraf, if it is the right way to go about it, if you are forcing players who are playing in the national team to play domestically so that they can improve the discipline.
Well, I don't know what the contract states, I can't really say, but I mean, logically, you'd say you need to play at home to be able to play at home, but to play for your country, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is it's all complicated. In fact, in the last almost a year ago, I think to the date, South Africa's cricketers' second team went to New Zealand to play in a test match because Cricket South Africa were okay with their main players playing in the SA20 League, which is actually owned by the IPL because they were getting big money and they needed that money to survive. Can you see how complicated this thing is?
Very complicated. Yeah. It's very complicated. But ending things off with tennis, defending champion Aryna Sabalenka beat Paula Badosa to advance into the third successive Australian Open final. Sabalenka claimed a 6-4, 6-2 win and is going to meet Iga Swiatek or Madison Keys in Saturday's decider. And she has now won 20 straight matches at the Australian Open to close in on a third consecutive crown. Will she do it? Only time will tell. With that said, it is a wrap from my side for now.
Perfect. More sports. And I mean, this point, cricketers, should they be forced to play in their home country to play for their country, right? Is that it?
That's the question.
Yes, no. Come on, you listening, wherever you may be, whether it's Worcester or whether it's somewhere else in the Western Cape, or whether it's in Gauteng or Polokwane. Let's hear it. What do you think? Yes, no about that. 086 000 2032. And you can WhatsApp us 0614 104 107. Text or voice notes, and nothing stopping you posting on social media. And you can tag me as well as Tumi, right? Tumi, what's your Twitter handle? Just give it to us once again.
It's Tumi Nkapele, one word.
Okay, they need to all get... I'll tweet it out as well. They don't pick it all up, right? More sport in an hour.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
Ma.
This F-bomb brought to you by Sanlam.
They are called loan sharks, not lone bunny rabbits, not lone puppies, cutie. The clue is in the name, Mama.
Finances is not a dirty word. Let's talk about it, Mzansi. Find out how at livewithconfidence.co.za. Sanlam. Sanlam Life is a licensed life insurer, financial services and registered credit provider.
Hey, listen up. With our Blue Sky offers, you can get your dream Ford with our optional service plan, and our Ford family guarantee comes standard. Think extensive dealer network, genuine Ford parts, and express service. Visit your trusted Ford dealer for the complete Ford ownership experience. Limited time offer while stocks last. T&Cs apply.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
So I'll tell you what, we're going to chat to Yasmin Suka in a moment about families of apartheid victims getting ready to sue government over what they see as a failure to investigate and prosecute political crimes committed during that era. And in a way, so linked to that is the statement we've now got from the President. Ramaphosa, President, has signed into law the expropriation bill, which repeals the pre-democratic Expropriation Act of 1975 and sets out how organs of state may expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. Now, this bill has undergone a 5-year process of public consultation and parliamentary deliberation, aligned with legislation on expropriation with the Constitution. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will say now, right, that the bill assented to by Ramaphosa outlines how expropriation can be done and on what basis. This law will assist all organs of state, local, provincial and national authorities to expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. All I would say is we'll hopefully get a response on that just now from an expert, but certainly there's nothing stopping you from what little you've heard to comment on that. I certainly will welcome your thoughts, as we often ask you this question: what is it for you that moves the national pulse? Well, I'll tell you what, this should certainly do so. Let's chat then to Yasmin Suka, former TRC Commissioner, board member of the Foundation for Human Rights. Yasmin, good to connect with you once again on the National Pulse.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me.
Much appreciated. Right, I understand, you're part of this Foundation for Human Rights that has the support of families, or you're effectively advocating on their behalf to sue government over its failure to investigate and prosecute political crimes that were committed during the apartheid era. Best to give us some context to all of this.
Well, as you know, the amnesty in South Africa was a very generous one, but it was also, to a certain extent, it was a compromise, because the state has the obligation to investigate and prosecute serious crimes. But the amnesty deal was seen as a bridge to allow peaceful transition in South Africa. But the law always said that if you did not apply for amnesty, or you were refused amnesty, then the law would follow its course. Now, when the TRC completed its work, it handed over its first set of reports to President Mandela in 1998. At the same time, it handed the National Prosecutorial Authority a list of around 300 cases which it said needed to be investigated for the purposes of prosecution. Turn the clock to the current period, and you look at the fact that there have hardly been any prosecutions, there have hardly been any inquest, and in fact there's been a complete neglect between 2003 and 2017 of really dealing with the TRC cases. And, what we document in the application is the way in which the state suppressed the TRC cases, and in fact that suggests political interference at the highest level. And so, the apartheid victims' families were victimized by the apartheid state, and what you have seen now is that for a second time they have been victimized and their rights have been violated. And so this case is, an effort to make sure that their rights are vindicated, the violations are recognized, and that the President sets up an independent commission of inquiry to explore the whole question of political interference, and the fact that many apartheid perpetrators have argued that, in fact, they were given a second deal. In fact, former President de Klerk, when he was on his deathbed, said he didn't understand why they would attempt to prosecute people, because the new government had actually signed a different deal allowing perpetrators to get off scot-free. So, it's really an attempt to look at the fact that people's rights were violated, to look at measures to understand why. And then, of course, to look at why the institutions of the state, the NPA and the DPCI, didn't do their jobs. And, thirdly, also to look, it's future-looking, because it looks at constitutional damages to set up a trust which would further the question of investigations, look at truth recovery measures, and of course the question of memorialization. So it's an attempt really to deal with the fact that over the last 3 decades, very little has been done to ensure that the rights of victims are protected.
Okay. So, lots of thoughts to come out of it. First of all, in terms of the families that, in fact, you or your foundation represents, right? So
Yes.
How many families do you represent?
Well, in this particular case, we have 25 families who have signed off on the application. But if you actually look at, there are a number of other families that the foundation represents as well. But, it was very difficult to get all of them on board so we could get this application off, because, there are these questions of making sure that they understand what's happened. But I think that at this point we probably have about 60 families that we represent, and They employed, private investigator to look into their cases and really compel the state to take action in these cases.
All right, and then you speak about this entire issue over a period of 2003 rather to 2003 to 2017 has been suppressed. Yes. You're saying, right? So suppressed by whom?
Well, that's if you look at our application, we set out fairly extensively. I think there are three sources that we use. Affidavits that were put forward, for instance, in the Simelane case by the former head of the National Prosecutorial Authority, Busi Pikoli, and Anton Ackerman. And then when you look at the High Court action in the Timor matter, you also had affidavits from the prosecutor Chris McAdam and Tari Pretorius. And then, of course, there are other people who have done private interviews with the generals who've made their information available. And when you put all of that information together, you get, a real picture of the fact that there were attempts all through those years to create another opportunity for perpetrators to get another deal. Secondly, there were task teams that were set up, which were made up of representatives from intelligence, from the Office of the President, from the police, from the Justice Ministry, and all of them, in fact, were trying to find ways to make sure that there could be some way of getting another deal through. And, much of this took place under two governments, the government of former President Mbeki, and then, of course, the government of Jacob Zuma. And under this government, despite the appeals by families to the president to set up a commission of inquiry, you've had very little response to him. Mm-hmm. And so the families feel that the state has a case to answer. And in fact, their indifference to the fact that these were people who gave up their lives for the sake of freedom in our country is totally repugnant.
And understandable. I will just put it to you differently. I mean, you spoke about suppressed, this whole issue has been suppressed, but you also spoke about political interference. Now, I mean, that leads to a bigger issue about, conspiracies and people conspiring to do certain things. So, I mean, who's doing the political interference? Who has done so?
Well, I think that when you begin to put the evidence together, you really get a picture of senior cabinet ministers in President Mbeki's government who actually prevented the NDPP from, dealing with the TRC cases. And of course, when you look at the affidavits of some of the prosecutors, they actually say that in fact, the police were instructed not to make investigators available, and that there was a moratorium on investigating these cases from 2003. And so one of the things we would like to know is, were these bureaucrats and officials acting on their own? Were they simply not doing their jobs, as President Mbeki has suggested? Mm-hmm. Or did, in fact, the instructions not to proceed on these matters come from the highest level, which is from his office, and involved a range of cabinet ministers, and the same for President Jacob Zuma.
All right, just the last thing. So in terms of, the initial point, the plan is, you talked about a separate commission, but also suing. Suing, we're talking about money, right? So have you put a value to it?
We have put a value to it, and obviously, it does go into, and I think millions, but when you look at that over a 4-year period, then that's not such a big amount. And we break it up into, really looking at this question of how to proceed, in terms of truth recovery for the families of victims. And then, of course, we look at supporting initiatives.
Can you give us a figure very quickly? Just understand it'll be up for negotiation, if anything, but is there a figure that you can give us?
Difficult to say. It is in the papers, but we are looking at, defining that more tightly.
Okay. Let's leave it at that. Yasmin Sruka. In fact, a former TRC commissioner, but now board member of the Foundation for Human Rights, reflecting on the fact that apartheid victims now using through the Foundation for Human Rights, intending to sue government over its failure to investigate and prosecute political crimes committed during the apartheid era. Right, let's get your thoughts, because of course it is the national pulse, but while we reflect the national pulse, I also want to feel your pulse.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Just last month it was December, the season to be merry, or December. For those who know that it's not just a month, but a lifestyle. Now it's January and life is threatening watching financially. There's back to school and your own goals, and January is on everyone's lips.
Mara, you can get the relief you need right now and start the year strong with the personal loan from Nedbank with access up to 400,000 Rand. Search Nedbank Personal Loans and get a loan that offers you more. Nedbank. See money differently. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
So why should I use We Buy Cars if I want to sell my vehicle?
Because We Buy Cars buys cars.
But will I get the right price?
Of course. We Buy Cars buys thousands of vehicles and knows exactly what every vehicle is worth. Their buyers deliver exceptional service and pay you immediately.
And how do I know what they'll pay for my vehicle?
It's easy. Visit webuycars.co.za or use the We Buy Cars app. Follow the simple steps and voila, you'll get a fantastic price for your car. We Buy Cars. Quick, easy, the best.
Andile, the CEO of a multinational corporation, is driving home with his daughter.
Dad, why is the tooth fairy so stingy?
Stingy? Well, she makes sure everyone gets something.
Does everyone at your company get something?
Yes, they're covered by Old Mutual Corporate's employee benefits.
Even Abdul.
Of course, he gets retirement benefits.
And Sisampa on that big machine.
She gets group risk cover if that big machine hurts her.
Wow, that's amazing, Dad.
Visit oldmutual.co.za/employee benefits and go from questions to solutions for your employees with Old Mutual Corporate. Old Mutual Life Assurance Company SA Limited is a licensed FSP and life insurer. T's and C's apply.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
We'll chat to Mark Barnes just now. He's got some big thoughts about forget degrees, get delivered to the demands of the economy first, right? But let's get your thoughts.
Good afternoon, Ashraf and SFM listeners. Gwede Mantashe must not come and tell us that illegal mining is costing the country 60 billion. He is not serious. Because remember, this gold is being taken from the abandoned mines. These mines were mined and the owners of this mine made a lot of money and they went overseas where they came from. Now, if that is the case, if they know that 60 billion is vanishing in the air, why are not they taking it serious, this thing of artisanal mining? So that the man can come into the economy, that 60 billion can come into the economy legally. They mustn't play with people's minds. Thanks, James in Johannesburg.
Afternoon, Ashraf, Moses in Durban. Ashraf, this Department of Mining and Minerals, it's just a disgrace, and those people, individuals who have occupied this position are just disgrace to this South Africa. You see, what is holding them to issue licenses to community around those mines, so that they can just reduce the poverty in those communities? But because it's NC's source of income, that's why they are giving us this useless song called Zamazamas. Yet it's NC and big guns who are benefiting this. If our police and armies are criminals, why not use other foreign forces? We have Wagner, our dearest friends, Russia, China, Cuba. If you are failing, if ours are just criminals, these Zamazamas, why not use international ones?
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Mkade here in Kala. Hey, Ashraf. This school 30% pass mark is the thing that is not right. Where is it leading our young ones? It leads them nowhere. Our few universities are turning them, these matriculants, away because they don't meet the entrance mark to the varsity. Before, 30% wasn't even a supplementary. I don't know what is the government of South Africa doing about this, or think they are doing, or they are making just these children slaves. Because even outside the country, they could even not work on Western countries with or find university with this 30%. That was just an age you'd go anywhere with 30%. Thanks, Ashraf. Better here.
Well, thanks for that. Look, I don't think, to be fair, it's 30% for the entire pass. I mean, yes, there's a 30% for some subjects, 3, and then others are 40%. Whether that's good enough. In fact, by the way, listen to my chat coming up after 4 o'clock just now. Because that talks about all of that and a whole lot more in terms of what finally happens when learners get to the open market, right? Grady Mantashe, illegal 60 billion. I don't know. Does that mean you're suggesting that they must now, because it's such a big business, it must be legalized? Should we legalize it? Should we legalize an illegal mine because there's so much money involved in that? And then the other one about the Zamazamas get foreign forces to come and assist us. Okay, I don't know much about that, but I hear you. Let's get thoughts on the TRC from Vuyiswa in Parktown. Vuyiswa, hi.
Hi, Ashapaya.
Yeah, go for it. What's your thoughts?
Yes, my thought is that as one of the victims, and for me, this is great because I was even contemplating on it the whole past month. It's better I approach international lawyers who can assist us in this because the TRC is an unfinished business. And this comes from the Codesa sunset clauses. No, it's an unfinished business. They discussed it there, and this president is good. He's in office. He knows a lot. Why they've left us like that with such trauma that they're not even worried about. No.
Well, I mean, maybe that's exactly the point of what Yasmin Suka is saying. There's a serious disconnect, and they're suggesting this political affairs and a whole lot more.
This GNU, because they benefited from it.
But I think it happened a lot more. I mean, it didn't happen last week. This is going on for 20 years.
No, they know. They know. That's why they disrespect us.
But that's what I'm saying. Who's in charge of all that over the years? It's not just one president at the tail end.
They were, you know what? Remember, some of them are involved. They were working with the system.
Okay.
Pretending to be with us.
I don't know. We'll have to find out when we find out. Thanks for that.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for that. Let's get to. Let's talk about another thought on miners and that 60 billion rand comment from Gwede Mantashe. Kandisa in Stilfontein. Hi. Kandisa, go for it. Yeah. Hello.
Yes. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. Right. What's your point?
Look, Afresh, as people of Stilfontein, Mr. Mantashe and Minister of Police, they were here. And we are in a mining area. We have been applying for mining rights. And you ask yourself, why blacks don't get mining rights, but white people, they get mining rights in GMR. And we said to Mr. Mantashe, we asked the president to request Mr. Mantashe to come back here in Stilfontein. Because as residents of Stilfontein, we want to talk to Mr. Mantashe. You see?
Well, I don't know about blacks not getting. I mean, amongst the most famous ones. What about Patrice Motsepe coming to mind? I mean, they've got mining rights. Just think about it.
Look, Afresh, we have these rock dams. You see, these rock dams can create jobs for our people. Can do trainings, can do whatever. We need that minister to come and talk to us. We need the Minister of Mineral and Energy.
All right, point made, and hopefully we'll get him up soon. All right. Okay, thank you for that, Kandisa. In fact, there's further comments, and you can comment on the conversation we had about the e-hailing, the drivers, Ubers, as well as Bolton. They effectively protesting because they don't have permits and their cars are being impounded. The conversation I had with Yumna Al-Said regarding just reflecting on a few days now, 4 or 5 days post that ceasefire in that region, Palestine, Gaza, and Israel. Any comments on that? Feel free to comment. We'll chat to Mark Barnes in a moment or so. First things first, let's get the news. It's 4 o'clock. Here's Ondela.
Thank you, Ashraf. Top stories at 4. Ramaphosa signs expropriation bill into law, and Mantashe speaks on the impact of illegal mining on the economy. For SFM News, I am Ondela Mbana, and a very good afternoon. President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed the expropriation bill into law. The bill repeals the Pre-Democratic Expropriation Act of 1975 and sets out how organs of state may expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. It has undergone a 5-year process of public consultation and parliamentary deliberation and will align legislation on expropriation with the Constitution. The law provides for disputes to be referred for mediation or to appropriate courts. Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources Gwede Mantashe says illegal mining is a war on the economy. He was speaking during a media briefing in Pretoria on the mine's health and safety statistics for 2024. Over 1,900 illegal miners were retrieved from a disused mine in Stelfontein in the northwest in the past weeks. This after the SAPS launched its crackdown operation Vala Umgodi at the mine in August last year. Mantashe says illegal mining still remains a criminal activity.
There can be no two ways about it. It is criminals attacking the economy. Precious metals illicit trade is estimated in 2024 to about 60 billion. That 60 billion is a leakage on the value of the economy of the country. It's a serious criminal activity, and we support Vala Umgodi.
The South African Democratic Teachers Union in the Western Cape has called for police visibility in schools to ensure the safety of teachers and learners. This follows the fatal shooting of a school principal this morning in a Tuleni Primary School in Gryfontein outside Cape Town. The 54-year-old was shot dead by 3 unidentified men while sitting in his vehicle with his wife outside the school premises. The suspects fled the scene in an unknown vehicle. SADU's Provincial Secretary Sibongile Kwazi.
To call upon the police as well as the Department of Safety and Security within the province to ensure that there is police visibility early in the mornings around schools, because we understand that the visibility of police is a deterrent to criminals. So if they can make sure that especially in our areas.
The University of Cape Town says it has received nearly 100,000 applications from prospective first-year students for the 2025 academic year. However, it only has places for 4,500 first-year students. UCT, along with other universities across South Africa, have been under pressure over the last few years as the number of applications continue to grow annually. As Israeli military continues an operation in Jenin in the occupied West Bank for a 3rd day, the army says it's killed 2 Palestinian gunmen in a nearby town who carried out a shooting earlier this month. The raids are part of Israel's Iron Wall campaign across the Palestinian-occupied territory, launched just days after a ceasefire in Gaza. The BBC's Yolande Nell reports.
Palestinian reports say that Israeli forces surrounded a house in Berkin, firing at it with missiles and ordering those inside to leave. 2 Palestinians were killed and their bodies taken, they say, before the house was demolished by a bulldozer. Hamas and the Israeli army have said that the men carried out a deadly shooting attack in the West Bank earlier this month. In Jenin, residents say there have been gunfire and explosions in the city's urban refugee camp and that thousands of people have fled, with many others trapped in their homes.
Recapping the top story, Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources Gwede Mantashe says illegal mining is a war on the economy. He was speaking during a media briefing in Pretoria on the mine's health and safety statistics 2024. I am Mondela Mbana for SFM News Headlines at 4:30.
In sports, Keys down Sriantec to advance to the final. Botswana officially appoint Ramo Rebudi as a head coach, and Parnell leaves Pretoria Capitals. More details at 4:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the M1 southbound in central Johannesburg is slow moving towards Crown Interchange, and the N1 northbound has a crash reported at Buccleuch Interchange. All lanes are open. In KZN, the N2 is queuing on the link to the N3 East at Spaghetti Junction, and the M7 is slow moving at South Coast Road. In Cape Town, the M5 southbound queuing towards Kromboom Road exit, and the N7 Jakes Harville Drive southbound slow moving towards Voortrekker Road. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
Stay safe on the roads. SAFM is with you.
If you think you cannot afford a lawyer,
Think again. Clientele Legal has made professional legal services affordable for you. Whether it's a civil, criminal, or labor-related matter, we have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195 and we'll call you back. Clientele General is a licensed non-life insurer and an authorized FSP. Standard rates and terms and conditions apply.
Every person, no matter who you are, what music you're inclined to listen to, and what you do with your weekends. You need a weekend playlist. It's that musical mix of music that accompanies the lazy weekends, whether catching up with friends and family or just taking some time to reflect. Tune in to The Soundtrack of Your Life with me, Ernest Pillay, Saturdays and Sundays, 1 to 4 on SAFM.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
So we're going to chat to Mark Barnes shortly about, he's saying, forget degrees, put supply and demand for skills first. That comes up. And we'll chat to the spokesperson for the Western Cape Department of Education, who's dismissed claims that only schools from poor areas have lost contract teachers in that region. That comes up just now. You, clearly, as part of the National Pulse, are a big driver of what moves the National Pulse, so feel free to connect with me with any of the biggest issues that we've covered and what we have not covered that you'd like to raise. 086 000 2032, WhatsApp, text or voice note messages 0614 104 107. Right. In fact, amongst the thoughts we've had, here's some comment.
Ashraf, 60 billion is lost through illegal miners. 484 rand is spending on one inmate serving the sentence in prison. Hey, African politics. If you don't beat them, join them. Bruno and Morokweng.
Hello, Ashraf. Correctional Service complain about the overcrowding of foreign prisoners. Why they didn't deport those people to their countries? Because of the government is spending a lot of money to support those people in prison. Please, this is Chipan Masema from Mikuruleni, originally in Popa Kasikokun.
Well, I mean, that's the issue we discussed yesterday with the representative from the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. And yeah, why? I mean, that's their proposal, to say deport them so that we don't have to subsidize them being in our prisons, and some of them are life prisoners, for like 600 of them, in fact, foreign nationals, prisoners for life. By the way, the thoughts on the conversation I had with Yumna Said, feel free to comment on that too. In terms of, 4 or 5 days after the ceasefire, what do you see, what has developed there, any things that you wish to pick up on that you'd like to comment? You certainly can join me here on the National Pulse. But let's get there now to Mark Barnes, and I want to just check with Keys if he's on the line. Mark Barnes is there. So, he's the former CEO of the Post Office, and I suppose that's a label, Mark, that's not going to go away from you. But we're going to talk about important issues about, growing your careers and growing the economy. So, Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for your interest. Sure.
Thank you. Right. Now, first things first, I mean, you've written a piece, and that's why I'm really talking to you about it, because I think it's an interesting one that needs debating. And you're saying, put supply and demand for skills first, right? And that, of course, is giving it context. What has happened? We've finished the school year, we've got the matric results, and now there's a mad scramble for university places, and there's just not enough seats at universities. What do you mean by that? Put supply and demand for skills first.
Oh, thanks. I think what we've done is we've created the perception that getting a degree is, whatever degree, okay, just get a degree, is the panacea for getting a job. It's not. Okay. And so, the notion that you go to university to get a job is skewed away from the true purpose of university, which is to get an education and to create a capacity and an ability. And of course, universities are only a very small piece of where you can go for tertiary education. And so we've inflated the importance of the degree. So everyone wants a degree, and I just think that's misguided. And students coming out of university now are already facing a massive backlog. Students coming out of anywhere are facing a massive backlog of underemployment, which they've got to fight their way through. I think there are 8 odd million people unemployed, half the people between the ages of 15 and 24. The statistics are well known. So now we have 350,000 people, students who qualify to go to university. And we have about 200 places for them to go. So they're not all going to get in. And it's worse when you go to the leading university. At a university like WITS, it's 25-1, the applications to the places. A university like UJ, it's 35-1. Now, that might have something to do with geography or something. But what I'm saying is, when you finish matric, sit down and go, what do I want to do? My recommendation is that you actually go and work for a year first, and in some place, and start getting an understanding of what the real world is and what your aptitudes are and what your natural abilities and things are, and then go and study further if that might be required. And the fact that we've given technical qualifications and on-the-job training and all of these kinds of things a sort of a second-class rating to a degree is absurd, particularly in our country.
But I mean, you're saying get a job. How do you get a job in a very jobless economy? I mean, this 4 out of 10 employable people are unemployed.
Well, you start talking to the people that supply jobs first. Okay, so imagine a world where you called in Eskom and Sasol and the public service for that matter and all the bank representatives. You said, okay, guys, how many people do you want and what must they be qualified as in the next 2 years? And Sasol says we want 420 electrical engineers, chemical engineers, should I say. Eskom says we want 40 people in finance and 26 electrical engineers and whatever, some coal experts. If you list that down and you get the aggregate demand, and obviously not just 3 companies, all of the companies, they fill in a questionnaire every year. And you say, you need 3 engineers? Good. Pay for them. Okay? You pay for them to go to university. You're part of the selection process. And when they come out of university, they will repay that debt of service to you by working for you. When you come out of university, I went to university, I had to borrow money to go to university personally. I got offered a bursary, but I had to work at that. So I had a job. I was forced into a job when I left university because that was the deal. So I'm saying, if we want to think about how many places we have, if we want to think about what universities and TVETs and other places of tertiary learning, first ask what is the output that's required. When you get there, then you say, okay, that caters for 100,000 matriculants of these standards. What are we going to do with the rest? Well, then you go back into central government. You go, well, we've now got 200,000 people that have got a good matric pass. Well, maybe they can feed into industry-specific developments that we make for them to go and work in. You can't just pitch up with all of these qualifications without even asking anyone if there's a job there.
Well, I mean, we also know, it's interesting because even medical doctors can't get jobs. And, we've chatted about it with the Minister of Health. So to put it differently and maybe give it more a graphic example, are we in a situation now that in this rush to get degrees, and so many get degrees, and every school flaunts the fact that just how many of them have got these bachelor's degrees, right? Do we have a mismatch? When I say mismatch, let me try and give you a cricketing example. Are we in a situation where we are in serious need of fast bowlers, but in fact what we're doing is we are putting our money and training batsmen where the need is for fast bowlers? Is that sort of thing what's happening in the economy?
Yeah, it's happening in cricket as well. But that's exactly what's happening. We've got a total mismatch. And in order and it feeds back into the system. So everyone thinks, get a degree. So then we make it easier to get a degree for everyone, which means more people pitch up for less jobs. Okay? And then we make it even easier to get a matric. So now the pass mark has got to be 40% in some subjects, 50 in others. You've got to do this and so on to get a university entrance. And that manifests in another misperception, in my view, okay, which is that this year we had 319,000 distinctions out of our matrics. Okay. Now that's wonderful in one sense, but it's a little bit worrying in another, because when I went to school, and I'm much older than all of you, back in the 70s or something, and there are other structural reasons for that, which, not the purpose to explore tonight, which I accept. But if you got a distinction, one distinction in matric, I mean, you were made mayor of the town the next day, okay? It was rare, okay? And if you got 2 or 3 or 4, if you got 5 distinctions, you were on the front page of the Star for a week, okay? And so on. And now we've made it easy to qualify for, so we have mass qualification for absent job opportunities. That creates huge disappointment and disillusion, whereas if we did it the other way around, and we started planning what the economy required and what we could invest in, and let's say we came to the conclusion that we need to build labor-intensive businesses. Let's just say that was the conclusion. And then we would go out and we would raise the capital, because we could demonstrate that every year we're going to have 100,000 matriculants who are got a good matric, who are not going to get into university. Let's find them a place to work, and let's become competitive on a global scale and export and do all of those good things. There doesn't seem to be a discussion between the customers of the university, which is the companies that employ. It's like you're sitting in a shop and you just produce what you want or what your kids tell you to produce. You produce 300,000 green pencils. And then someone comes and says, Dad, they use lead pencils now. Eh? I mean, you wouldn't do that, right?
So we're not meeting market needs or the needs of the economy, right? So
there's a total disconnect.
Okay, so now, I mean, you certainly feel strongly about building capacity. I mean, you're trying to do that at the post office as well. If you were told today, and if I'm asking you today now, it's like, okay, I've heard what you've said. If you were given an audience to the president, and maybe you have it already, as well as, say, the Minister of Higher Education and Basic Education, to say, come on, let's implement your one good idea, just one solid idea around all the things you've just told me now. What would you do first?
I would ensure that, just talking about degrees, I would ensure that we had a clear understanding of the demand for graduates, and then walk back into what the supply should be. Okay, and I would solve the ecosystem rather than push it or pull it one way. If you're sitting building a company, any company that launches a business does market surveys to see who wants the product, does cost surveys to see whether they can still make a margin of it. We don't seem to do that. We seem to be, in silos. We must get everyone to school. I agree with that, but only if there's something they can do afterwards. And the result is that even the people that get into university, very few of them actually, graduate, because there's this whole funnel that's been constructed around popularity rather than purpose. And so it'll take years to fix. But if we all got over ourselves and if we started focusing more on the future than the past, and we said, okay, these are the facts, not the perceptions, not the emotions. These are the facts. We've got these many positions for these kinds of people. Let's start by filling them up, and then let's start investing in the gap.
And, to a degree, the former Vice-Chancellor of UCT is saying something similar. There's this huge focus on universities, but in terms of TVET colleges and others, that's really where the market needs the numbers, and that's where it's not going in the big numbers because of this perception that's the second division, so to speak. Mark Barnes, thanks for your time, much appreciated, former Post Office CEO, but certainly commenting on how do we need to fix our education, but also, very importantly, the graduates that come out of matric and then from university, where do they go next? They can have all the degrees in the world. If they can't then get jobs, then there's a mismatch. I gave the example of the fast bowler, when maybe we need batsmen. We can think of many others. If you are defending, if you're defending a lead at that time in rugby, 1 point defense with 5 minutes to go, you don't bring on an attacking player. You bring on a solid defender who can keep the ball. Something along that line. This is the National Pulse. Let's feel your pulse.
At Business Outsurance, ensuring your business is our business. Switch to Business Outsurance today, and you could get a massive 20% discount on your business insurance premium.
Get affordable cover to protect your business against everyday risks. Get the best business insurance at the best price for your business. SMS quote to 43328. That's quote to 43328 to switch and save today. Licensed insurer and FSP. TCs and information online.
Compliments for 2025, Mangani. Call me Mabel Goals because I'm coming for it all this year. Body, relationship, and financial goals. With my Just Invest account, financially I'm cruising. 2 more to go. You know any available Prince Charming voice, man?
I've got you, Mabel. Sorienga. Mara, you can also be like Mabel and earn up to 8.25% in interest to start the year right. Open yours via the Money app today. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. Promo rates apply. Go to nedbank.co.za for more information.
Hi, I'm Khomotso KG Mweketi, and I believe in music's ability to connect, to heal, to remind, and to bring joy. And each week on my Saturday and Sunday show Seasons right here on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, I endeavor to do just that. So join the movement of Seasons every Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's addictive. You might invite a friend. Seasons, only on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. With me, KG Mweketi.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Right, let's get to another issue. By the way, we will I welcome your thoughts on that in terms of solutions, perhaps, in terms of what was said. And I see some people want to comment on that conversation I had with Mark Barnes. So what do you think about, seriously, how do we move away from the mismatch between graduates not meeting, targets for the economy, and therefore we still have this mass unemployment? Do we turn that around completely? In many ways, linked with all of that is education and the type of teachers we have and what are we being taught, so curriculum and all that sort of thing. So with that in mind, we have a segue now to what's happening in the Western Cape. In August of last year, the Western Cape Education MEC, David Maynor, announced that 2,407 teachers in public schools would be cut now, like in January. So that's the one thing, and we've discussed that. Now we hear that the independent researcher and education consultant, Dr. Seelan Naidu, says data analysis shows only schools from poor areas have lost contract teachers, implying that schools from more, middle class and wealthy areas in the Western Cape, in fact, have not lost those contract teachers that we spoke about. So, I understand there's been a response from the Western Cape Education Department. They have a different view to that. Kerry Mochlin is with me, the spokesperson for the Western Cape Education Department. Kerry, appreciate your time. Thanks for connecting to the National Pulse.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So, okay, you've certainly heard the thoughts and the claims of Dr. Seelan Naidu.
Yes, yes, we have.
Right. Your response?
Well, I think the best way to sort of start off things is to really talk about some factual information. And it's factual information that I think perhaps Dr. Naidu was not aware of, and that is how posts are actually allocated to schools in South Africa. And the way that it's done is using a model that the national government gives us, a post-provisioning model, which is a formula. And basically, you put into this mathematical formula whatever your total number of posts in your system will be, and it does the calculation based on each individual school. So it's not a case of us going through a list of schools and kind of randomly picking and choosing based on a whim. It's actually based on something that's well recognized in the education system, and really any education researcher should know that.
Okay, so what did you do? I mean, you had to cut 2,407 teacher posts. So what did you do?
So for starters, I just want to say it was not something that we wanted to do. And you did mention in August that we spoke about this quite extensively. It's a choice that we did not want to make, but unfortunately it's the position we were in due to a massive budget deficit. So certainly what happens, you have a computerized model, and it actually takes into account for each school a whole lot of factors. So it takes into account class sizes, the workload of teachers, the size of the school, curriculum, the poverty of the surrounding area, and a couple of other factors. There's quite a detailed document on this available on the National Department's website. And so essentially, when you change the total number of posts and you reduce it, that's naturally going to have an impact on that equation and can result in a school having fewer posts.
Okay, so in practical terms, respond to the comparison that Seelan's making, and maybe just address that, because he's suggesting that the schools where these contracts were, teachers were cut, were from the poorest of the poorest schools, and they were certainly not the wealthier schools. So explain then, what did you do so we understand it well?
Well, it's interesting because that statement doesn't actually match his own data, because in his own article and the table that he puts in his own article, he shows the large number of quintile 5 schools or fee-charging schools that he actually says have had their post cut. So to claim that it's only somehow rich schools that have somehow not had post cut is just, it's just simply factually false. There's no other way to put it.
Okay, how is there something that you've chatted to him about? Because I suppose that he's been this education consultant. He's certainly not giving you a good name in terms of the Western Cape department. How have you had this conversation with him?
Well, no. All we had was an announcement to the media and a document which, I'm going to be honest, is not research. He is a private consultant who writes up pieces like this. This is the second piece attacking the Western Cape Education Department that he's written. Unfortunately, the last time it had to do with school funding, and a member of the public had to phone into a radio station and explain to him what the quintile system was. So really, I find it very difficult to consider this an engagement of two competing viewpoints. One is factual, which is that there is a post-provisioning model. Again, something well known to all education, everyone in the education sector, and certainly education unions and education experts. And then on the other hand, you have what was clearly, it was a purpose, it served a purpose, it's propaganda, and unfortunately, it's played on the emotions of our teachers who suffered really through this process. A lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. And I just think it's deeply unethical to try and mobilize that.
Okay, let's then talk about the reality that you're facing. You did say that your department did not want to cut any posts, but you were forced to do so, and something we had a chat about a few months ago, I understand. So what impact has these teacher post cuts had on your schools?
It's actually, the impact's been really severe. And we did say that we knew that would happen, and that it was a very difficult choice to have happen. We've had our average teacher-to-learner ratio increase. We've managed to get it all the way down to 1:34.2 last year. And unfortunately, this has pushed it back to 1:36.7. Obviously, as we know, averages will obscure differences in individual schools. So it really is unfortunate that the progress that we've made has been partially reversed, because over the past 5 years, we've added about 3,200 posts to our schools to try and improve that situation. So it was very unfortunate that we then found ourselves in a situation where we had to reverse it. What is fortunate, though, is for the start of the 2025 school year, I'm sure you'll remember that in his adjustment speech last year, the provincial minister said, we know that we're going to have a problem when it comes to growth. Obviously, as you know, the Western Cape Education Department schools, the number of kids in our schools grows every year really rapidly. And we said that we were working on a plan to try and get some growth posts together by cutting even deeper into the budget to be able to accommodate that growth and also staff our new schools. Unfortunately, last week, the minister was able to announce that has actually been achieved. So we could add up to 477 growth posts once we know how many kids have arrived to take up their place.
And you would need that very, very, very soon, I'm sure. Okay, so very quickly, we're on to news time. The number you gave about, moving up from 33, 34 per teacher to 37 out of your control, is that average similar across the board, or does that vary very greatly from a school in some of the wealthier suburbs versus a school in some of the townships?
I think it's very important to also remember that the reason that some schools, fee-charging schools, have lower class sizes is not because the WCED gives them more teachers. It's because parents pay for additional teachers. And you know that in this economy, obviously it's very difficult for parents to pay even more than they're already doing. But certainly you do have disparities from area to area. I think you want to look at it less in terms of wealthy areas and poor areas and rather in terms of areas with high demand. So, for example, you could have a school in a poor area with very low class sizes because it's in an area that people aren't moving to and that isn't rapidly growing. So certainly the average is something that is obscured. And when we do encounter a situation where we have a school where the numbers have increased dramatically, that is when we go in and identify that school for a growth post.
I understand.
And that process is taking place at the moment.
Perfect. That's where we leave it for now. Kerry Morkland, the Western Cape Education Department spokesperson. Let's get the news headlines. Here's Ondela.
Thank you, Ashraf. In the news headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed into law the expropriation bill. The act repeals the Pre-Democratic Expropriation Act of 1975. The legislation sets out how the organs of state may expropriate the land in the public interest for varied reasons. Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources Gwede Mantashe says illegal mining is a war on the economy. He was speaking during a media briefing in Pretoria on the mine's health and safety statistics for 2024. And the governing body of the International Criminal Court has expressed its deep concern at American moves to sanction the court and its personnel. A full update follows at the top of the hour with Greg Holmes.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 southbound in four ways queuing towards Winnie Mandela Drive exit. The N3 northbound in Bedford View is queuing on the link to the N12 East at Kilulis Interchange. The M1 southbound slow moving through Crown Interchange towards Boysons. Bayes Nordeer Drive in Honeydew is slow moving at Christian de Wet Road, and the N1 northbound in Midrand has a crash reported before New Road. In KZN, the N3 westbound has a crash before Cliffdale. All lanes are open. The N2 southbound queuing on the link to the N3 East at Spaghetti Junction. The M7 is slow moving at South Coast Road and the M7 queuing at the N2 highway. In Cape Town, the M3 northbound queuing at Paradise Road. The N1 inbound is slow moving on the elevated freeway. The N7 Jakes Hadwell Drive southbound is slow moving towards Voortrekker Road, and the N1 outbound slow moving towards Yiptiaga Avenue. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tumi Nkapele.
Okay, Tumi, you have your eyes, as we know, on the Australian Open.
Yeah, Madison Keys beat Iga Swiatek to set up an Australian Open final showdown with Aryna Sabalenka. Keys saved a match point before claiming a hard-fought 5-7, 6-1 and 7-6 win. And Swiatek's loss also means that Sabalenka will retain the world #1 ranking after the tournament. Meanwhile, South African rising tennis star Leo Martinez is grateful to be selected in the four-man Davis Cup team that is going to face Nigeria at Groenkloof Tennis Stadium next Saturday. At only 18, this will be his fourth time partaking in the international men's showpiece, which is backed by the experience of Captain Pietie Novel, Philip Henning and Alec Beckley. Matheson says that he does not take this opportunity for granted.
I think it's a very, very good opportunity. Very excited. I don't think there's a lot of players my age that was able to play the fourth tie already at 18 years old, so I think it's very exciting.
Moving on to cricket, all-rounder Wayne Parnell has left the Pretoria Capital squad for the remainder of this year's SA20. Parnell did not play a match in the 2025 SA20 and has not played a professional T20 fixture since April 2024. Earlier this year, the Pretoria Capitals had transferred the captaincy from Parnell to batsman Riley Rousseau. In rugby, this year's Six Nations will feature 20-minute red cards for the first time after the law variation was trialled during the November internationals. Under this new change, some red card offences will see a player sent to the sin bin for 20 minutes, with the offender then being able to be replaced on the field by a teammate off the bench when the punishment has been completed. However, referees can still hand out permanent red cards, and it was first introduced in the Southern Hemisphere. These 20-minute red cards will feature in the men's, women's and under 26 nations. In football, Botswana have named named South African-born Morena Raborubudi as the national team coach after having helped them secure a place in the Africa Cup of Nations finals later this year. Now, Raborubudi, who has taken Jwaneng Galaxy to the last two Botswana League titles, was caretaker coach last November when the Zebras drew away in Egypt to qualify for the Cup of Nations for only a second time. The BFA have set very tough targets for him, which are progressing beyond the group stages of the Cup of Nations final in Morocco in December, collecting at least 12 points in the 2026 World Cup qualifiers, qualifying for CHAN 2026, and winning the 2025 COSAFA Senior Men's Challenge. So his work is really cut out for him. Then the Europa League returns this evening with a series of exciting matches across Europe featuring high-profile clubs, including Manchester United. They're playing host to Rangers, and Tottenham Hotspur away to Hoffenheim. The Red Devils and Rangers are vying to secure their place in the knockout stages. United sits in 7th place while Rangers are 8th, just 1 point separating them, and Tottenham follows closely in 9th, just highlighting the competitive nature of the league with positions 4th to 7th, all tightly contested. To end things off, Real Madrid have become the first football club to generate more than 1 billion euros in the annual revenue. The Spanish Giants retain top spot with a revenue of 1.05 billion euros, with Manchester City in second with 708 million euros, and then Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester United and Bayern Munich complete the top 5. On that note, it is a wrap from my side.
So listen, are you still watching like 2 o'clock in the morning tennis or what?
If I have to, yes.
So you don't, at the moment you don't have to?
No, I'm not saying at the moment I don't have to.
No, because you did tennis is your game and you need to watch
it. Is.
So you're going to watch the finals, the women's finals. So that's tomorrow, is that right?
On
Friday, Saturday morning, Friday night, 2 o'clock, whatever time. You'll give us the time.
Definitely waking up.
And then the same thing for Sunday morning, because you have to. Got that. Right, more sports in an hour.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Outsurance definitely understands the nature of our business. Being properly insured is extremely important to the success of our business.
They come to the party very quickly, resolve things.
Actions speak much louder than words. Outsurance have shown us nothing but action.
Switch to Business Outsurance today and you could get a massive 20% discount on your business insurance premium. SMS quote to 43328. That's quote to 43328 to switch and save today. Licensed insurer and FSP. TCs and information online.
The Queens of South Africa's beautiful game are taking a break from their pitch duties to dress up and walk on the purple carpet. It's a special evening to celebrate players, coaches, administrators, and officials for their incredible devotion to the game. This is the Hollywoodbet Super League Awards 2024. From grassroots to glory. Witness the Hollywoodbet Super League Awards on Sunday, 26 January at 7:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Okay, let's get to those facts with Paswana Mpatlele, Senior Accounts Manager at Makwe Fund Managers. Paswana, you've got local and global markets in a moment, but let's start with news about cash build.
Yeah, Ashraf, good afternoon and to all your listeners. Cash build, well, the guys gave us a quarterly update. The guys reported a more stable operational growth. We see the group revenue is up 6%, thanks to South African dominance with good strong sales from the existing stores, around 5%. The newer stores are contributing a modest 1%, but we take anything. The PNL hardware is also continuing to provide support. See, revenue is up 6%. Yes, the overall gains were kept by the regions outside South Africa as they face the different economic challenges. However, overall for the guys, it's okay. Selling inflation sits at a low 1.5%, offering competitive pricing and value to consumers, and this has helped their transactional volume to increase at the tills. Market generally It's mixed. We're seeing there's a bit of caution note going through the market. We await Trump's speech at the World Economic Forum later in the afternoon. Uncertainty exists, especially with the fact that his recent remarks on Russia that more sanctions could come off if he proceeds with the war. And such a stance tends to play with, along with positive growth policies he's setting out, is supportive of the dollar yields. Oil, we're seeing it up 1% at $79.09 a barrel. Gold eased some of its gains into $2,735 an ounce. These moves are not generally benefiting emerging markets such as South Africa. We're seeing today a lot of sellers are greater than buyers, and the only money that is moving is towards exposure to stocks that earn in hard currencies like the dollar. But looking at the movements here, you see the JSE is down 0.8, financials are the biggest dragger, 1.5, resources 1%, all our industrials were flat. In the US, they opened down lower as they wait out the caution note. With Nasdaq down 0.5, S&P down 0.1, Dow was flat. The only dream is in Europe with CAC up 0.5, the DAX up 0.3, and FTSE up 0.1. Rand has shown some relative weakness, but not too much. Rand against the dollar is at 18.52. Rand against the euro is at 19.30 cents, and Rand against the pound to 2.85.
Right, thank you so much for that, Paswane. We will connect tomorrow, right? In the meantime, this is an important issue, right? The Department of Roads and Transport, they've commented on the e-hailing issue, right? So Lesiba Mpia, the spokesperson for the Gauteng Department of Transport, responding specifically to the conversation I had earlier on, well, in terms of the actual protest by these e-hailing drivers, particularly Uber and Bolt, right? And this is what he had to say.
So the Gauteng Provincial Regulatory Entity has been having meetings with all e-hailing and meter taxis, or rather metered services, regularly as part of listening, discussing and resolving issues affecting the sector. And the latest meeting was on the 9th of December, discussing the following: the backlog on operating licenses, formalization, security, drafting of regulations. So the MEC established a crisis committee on the operating licenses in December of 2024 to fast-track the issuing of operating licenses and dispose the historical backlog. The department presented the backlog plan on operating licenses to the industry. And then on the issue of formalization, the PRI is engaging all e-hailing and metered services with the intent to formalize and democratize all operators into proper governance structures. All associations have agreed to submit their database to regional toll labs. So as to security, PRI is working with the Department of Community Safety and all law enforcement agencies in the municipalities to monitor scholar transport and ensure safety and compliance by all operators. And in terms of the drafting of regulations, the same PRI has adopted plans to draft regulations on e-hailing and meter services. All groups are aware of the plans and will participate and input all sets of required regulations. So in conclusion, the MEC appeals that e-hailing and meter taxis type services must continue to engage and find lasting solutions to all issues and implement the plan presented during last meetings, which were held, in particularly the one that was held in mid-December 2024.
Okay, so that's their thoughts, and maybe you want to pick up on that conversation and share your opinions. 086 000 2032. And then, as always, WhatsApp, you have the option to text or to voice note 0614 104 107. We'll get your thoughts. I'll feel your pulse in a few minutes' time. But let's talk tourism next.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Right, so with me now is Bronwyn Oray, who's representing, in fact, the Tourism Grading Council of South Africa, TGSA. And Bronwyn, first of all, good to connect with you for the first time this year.
Hello, Ashraf, and yes, it's great to hear you again.
Much appreciated. Now, when we last spoke, it was looking ahead or sort of just in the midst of the holiday season. So now the holidays have come and gone, and I thought, let's have another conversation about just your work. One of the things that we know in all holiday makers, in whichever form of holiday dwelling they would use, right, a key factor is just the quality, and one of the determining factors would be grading, right? So perhaps that's a good way to start. What role do you play in the grading processes of different establishments?
Great. So Ashraf, the Tourism Grading Council of South Africa is responsible for setting the norms and standards for star grading across the country. So we're the only legislated entity that has the authority to do so. And what is really fantastic about that is that we set these standards with the tourism sector to determine your experience from a 1 to 5 star grading across many different categories, from hotels to guest accommodation, self-catering, and even venues. Okay.
And you're the only ones. How important is it? That means, when I say important, I would think on two levels. One would be, the holiday maker and how they value the grading. And the other one, of course, are the establishments who get graded.
Ashraf, it's really important to the holiday maker. The reality is when one spends money on a trip of a lifetime or your family holiday, you want to know that what you're spending that money on is going to be of value, and it's going to meet your expectations and even exceed your expectations. So I think what is critical about star grading is that it's really for consumer confidence. And it's really all about the consumer and making sure that as a consumer, when you book an accommodation provider, you get what you paid for. So it's really, really important for customer satisfaction.
So with that in mind, how then do you grade? Meaning, how do you grade up and downwards?
So we have quite a few different categories. So there's formal accommodation, which we all know is hotels and boutique hotels and that kind of thing. We have self-catering, guest houses. We have camping sites. We have backpacking. We have venues, as I mentioned earlier. We also have nature lodges, which is quite a big portion of South Africa's accommodation providers. And we really make sure we go the breadth and depth of the tourism sector. And we grade from a 1 star to a 5-star level. 1 star being quite a simple grading. All of the grading makes sure that you get hygiene and safety factors in there. It makes sure that certain facilities are in there. It makes sure that you're going to get certain levels of service, so the number of hours of service is available, and so on and so forth. It's very extensive, and it is done by a human being who is a certified grading assessor.
Okay, and let's assume, and yes, you mentioned different levels, so you could get, a 1-star establishment or a 2-star that deliberately, intentionally targets that market, and then the 5-star one that does the same, and they have different markets and different costs, right? But from your side, when you have these assessments, right? I don't think it can be just one-off. You would probably revisit them again, isn't it? That means the opportunity to grade up or down must happen. So a 2-star could be a 3-star next year, or a 3-star could be a 2-star the following year.
Absolutely, Ashraf. And I must say in the same breath, we are as proud of a 1-star as we are a 5-star. And what is really critical is that the establishment chooses their star grading based on the audience they want to appeal to. So in our grading process, what happens is the property applies for grading to meet a particular standard. We then review it against what they have applied for, and we either grant it to them or we make a recommendation on where they would rather fit in. But in some instances, we actually find some properties come back to us over the years and say, we might have been a 4-star, we prefer to be a 3-star because we see the market moving there. Or we've been at a 4-star, we actually now decided after some capital investment we want to pitch to a higher audience at a 5-star. So, properties can evolve either way, purely depending on their target market.
Because do I take it that if, for example, a establishment is pitched or graded for 3-star, or let's say 4-star, right? That then, in effect, their costs in terms of their rates or tariffs would be aligned to that, and sometimes it can actually go against the establishment because they have to then charge out too much, which means they are unable to attract the type of clientele that they really want.
Well, I think an establishment charges based on supply and demand. And when you start going from a star grading of 1 all the way to 5-star grading, you really are buying a different level of comfort. So as an example, at a 5-star property, you're going to get a dressing gown and slippers, a great turn-down service, 24-hour desk available to you. And for that, yes, there is a premium price. So, that is, and they said the properties will set prices based on supply and demand. And then, obviously when you come down to a 1-star or a lower star grading, that will also be set accordingly for that particular audience. So it really does depend on what the consumer wants to purchase from their level of comfort perspective.
Okay, let's talk about customer feedback. How important is that? How often do you get that sort of feedback that gets delivered? I would think, some of it could be in public spaces like social media, but others would be direct questionnaires to the establishment. I mean, do you get that sort of feedback, and does that assist you in your grading process as well?
Feedback is critical. We are constantly getting feedback. So from a consumer perspective, I encourage consumers to please contact us if they're not happy with an experience or they have an observation on grading. They can be happy, they can give us a compliment, they could also, if they've already escalated something to an establishment and need an assistance, if they are graded, we can also then assist the consumer if the matter is relevant to grading. So it's a very useful tool. We use feedback from the industry to create and amend and update grading criteria, so feedback is critical. And we make sure that we then go into our grading cycle to take note and to amend where relevant. So it's very important, and it does help the tourism sector become better at what they do.
Right. Well, let's leave it at that. Bronwyn O'Ray, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. We'll certainly give out your details right after the next break. Much appreciate your time.
Andile, the CEO of a multinational corporation, is driving home with his daughter.
Dad, why is the tooth fairy so stingy?
Stingy? Well, she makes sure everyone gets something.
Does everyone at your company get something?
Yes, they're covered by Old Mutual Corporate's employee benefits.
Even Abdul.
Of course, he gets retirement benefits.
And Sisampo on that big machine.
She gets group risk cover if that big machine hurts her.
Wow, that's amazing, Dad.
Visit oldmutual.co.za/employee benefits and go from questions to solutions for your employees with Old Mutual Corporate. Old Mutual Life Assurance Company SA Limited is a licensed FSP and life insurer. T's and C's apply.
I'm Michelle Constant. Join the JSB crew and I every Saturday and Sunday morning between 7 and 10 a.m. We promise to keep you informed and entertained with innovation, culture, cars, travel, life learnings, environment, and of course, your big fat juicy. Small stories, big ideas, massive inspiration. The Jet Set Breakfast on SAFM.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Okay, Bronwyn, just before I let you go, one last thing, right? What percentage of, establishments are not graded, and if they wish to be graded, what do they do?
So I would say, firstly, contact us on tourismgrading.co.za and put in your application. And in terms of the number that's ungraded, it's very hard to tell. There's a big variety of accommodation providers out there. But I can tell you that we will have well over 4,500 properties that are graded in South Africa. So it's very promising.
Okay, great. I appreciate your time. Bronwyn O'Ray, representing the Tourism Grading Council of South Africa. So there you are. If you wish to be graded, just connect with them, Tourism Grading Council of South Africa. Right, let's get your thoughts, your opinions after this.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Right, let's get to your calls. By the way, we'll get a response regarding President Ramaphosa's signing of the Land Expropriation Bill into law. We'll get a response from that coming up just now. In the meantime, let's get to some of the calls first. Rashid in Joburg, go for it, Rashid.
Good afternoon, Ashraf.
Afternoon.
I'd like to comment on the comment that a degree is not necessary to get a job.
Yeah.
So within my real-world experience, I've got over 25 years experience in the industry I am, applied for many jobs. I wouldn't make the shortlist because I don't have a degree. It's not that I'm inexperienced. I have the experience and capability. and many positions have been turned down, noting you do not have a degree.
Yes, I mean, I think your point is valid, and I think maybe, saying, I don't think maybe Mark Barnes is saying ignore the degree at all, because that would be very, very simplistic. But what he is saying is that in terms of the job, the broader job market, many of them very technical. You don't need to actually go the university route. You need to find what are the other routes, right, and meet the demand there. So that could be different sorts of training, which may not be the classic degree as we talk about.
True, and I find myself in a very technical environment where I've got industry certifications over the last 20 years. But at the end of the day, we are noted that we don't have degrees, and therefore you cannot proceed to the position.
Okay, I don't know what it's difficult to say. I would suggest you negotiate with them to say, give you a part-time job, because what you want then, if you've got the experience, you want a foot in the door. If you have a foot in the door and you're really good, then that door is going to open and it'll never close for you. Hopefully that will happen for you. Rashid, thanks for your call, right? But concerning, I hear that. Another thought from Imbawana in Mafikeng. Go for it, Imbawana. What's your point?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, right? Your thoughts?
Yeah, the application of the bill that the president did write into law, that is bringing confidence to the masses now. That is the number one priority for ANC to get vote again back. But now, when he did that, human settlement, transport, and housing, these three departments should work together. Why so? They must relocate people from the location which they are is not profitable. They must be near to the train station so that PRASA can be able to build a nice station for people to travel to.
Well, I mean, I hear you. I think we need to find out the detail, because normally when they talk about the bill or the act into law, it's at a broad level. It's how that plays out practically on a day-to-day basis and how it affects communities is what we need to find out. But listen, therefore, to the chat we'll have after 5 today, and in fact we have another conversation about it tomorrow, which I think will be very important. Just as we get a further response on that issue, we'll be chatting to Professor Ruth Hall, who was part of the advisory panel on land reform. So thanks for that, Imbawana. Let's get another opinion on the matric results. Tutukara Butalezi, go for it.
Prof, hi to you and your callers.
Right, hi. What's your point? Thank you.
Rashid. So I matriculated in 2012. I'm in agreement with Rashid. I matriculated 2012. I got 2023. I upgraded my matric results. Mm-hmm. Upon upgrading them, I've applied at various institutions. However, I'm being told no institution can pick up my results. So I got a statement telling me I got this mark, but it can't be picked up anywhere, and no university is accepting me. And my application is coming across as a fraudulent application at the moment.
Okay, but that is so bizarre. So what is your recourse then? I mean, what have you tried to do then? I mean, would you not go back to the...
So I phoned the national, I phoned provincial, I even learned of a new board that I didn't know exists, the matric board. So all of them, they are telling me this one is telling me that, and it seems as if there's no straight line of communication, because I did the amended exam. The amended exam is the May-June. Once you're above 21 years, you write the amended exam. So my amended exam is not picking up anywhere. However, I have a statement with me with an exam number telling me what mark I got.
Okay, wow. I tell you what, I mean, we can't say much more, except I'm so sorry about it. But more than that, I will say this much. Leave your details with Keys, my producer. Leave it with him. Between Keys and Temba, they'll try and see if we can connect you to the relevant department to actually try and track down your problem. That's the best we can do, which could well be exactly what you need to have done. Okay? Thank you for that. Right, there's lots of other comment that we'll take. Here's a voice note.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. I just want to know what happened to the mining charter that was introduced by the former minister, Msebenziswane. Is there anything that is being done to ensure that blacks are empowered when it comes to mining? Bafana Kumalo in Memel.
Hi, Ashraf and the SFM listener. Ashraf, ever since 1994, the politicians, they were preaching like one nation, let's building our nation being one nation, one people, one nation. Up to now, the only thing they're doing is just to building the tribes. They separate us forever now. I mean, some of the people, they can even put in the sticker, say like, I'm whatever, 100% or whoever, the other one, so and so and so. The black people will never come together. They hate each other to the core. Well, I
don't know if you can make a sweeping statement like they hate each other to the core. I don't agree with that. I think that people have dislike, and it doesn't matter what color, they have a dislike for people. Families have a dislike for each other, but to hate each other to the core is a generalization of an entire nation of people. No, I don't think so. In terms of the mining charter, maybe it's a conversation we need to be having soon about that. So point taken. Let's get the news now. It's 5 o'clock. Here's Greg House.
Thank you, Ashraf. In this news update, Ramaphosa signs the expropriation bill in concern over possible sanctions against the ICC. Good day to you. President Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law the expropriation bill. The act repeals the pre-democratic Expropriation Act of 1975. The legislation sets out how the organs of state may expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. Presidency spokesperson Vincent Magwenya.
In terms of this law, an expropriating authority may not expropriate property arbitrarily or for a purpose other than a public purpose or in the public interest.
The Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, says illegal mining is a war on the economy. More than 1,900 illegal miners were retrieved from a disused mine in Stilfontein in the northwest in the past weeks. This after the police launched a crackdown operation at the mine in August last year. The Minister was speaking during a media briefing in Pretoria on the mine's health and safety figures for 2024.
There can be no two ways about it. It is criminals attacking the economy. Precious metals illicit trade is estimated in 2024 to about 60 billion. That 60 billion is a leakage on the value of the economy of the country. It's a serious criminal activity. And we support Valamco. Yes.
The Student Representative Councillor at the University of Limpopo in Mangweng in Limpopo says there's no longer space for first-year students for this academic year. The university received over 300,000 applications and only 5,000 will be registered. The SRC President, Kamogelo Poto, says the university has reached its maximum intake. A man from Villiers in the Free State is set to appear again in the local magistrates' court next week, Tuesday, for a bail application. Mpuma Mokoena allegedly murdered his girlfriend and their 1-year-old son. He faces charges of murder, among others. Magistrate Ezekiel Matlo postponed the matter.
I need to advise you that the state has now added a third count against you, say, for defeating the administration of justice. The prosecutor indicated that full details will become available. However, the third allegation against you for defeating the administration of justice is that the state alleges that you wrongfully and intentionally performed the following acts to bury the bodies of Mpho Dlamini and Umpilo Mokoena.
The governing body of the International Criminal Court has expressed its deep concern at U.S. moves to sanction the court and its personnel. Earlier this month, the U.S. House of Representatives voted to introduce measures against the court for issuing arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the country's former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over the war in Gaza. The court is reportedly bracing for new President Donald Trump to launch economic sanctions against the ICC. The top story, President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed into law the Expropriation Bill. The act repeals the pre-democratic Expropriation Act of 1975. The legislation sets out how the organs of state may expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. I'll be back with more local and international news in the headlines at 5:30. For SAFM News, I'm Greg Khos.
In sports this hour, Amazulu looking to add on Stellenbosch misery, and Formula One drivers face new sanctions for swearing. More details at 5:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Starting off in KZN, the M7 slow moving at South Coast Road and the M7 queuing at the N2 highway. In Gauteng, the M1 southbound in central Johannesburg slow moving towards Crown Interchange, and Bayes Nadir Drive westbound in Cresta has a crash reported at Pendoring Road. In Cape Town, Victoria Road outbound slow moving through Woodstock and the M5 southbound queuing towards Kromboom Road exit. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
Stay safe on the roads. SAFM is with you.
Owning a small or medium-sized business takes courage, skill, and determination. The Clientele Legal Business Plan is there to protect, guide, and assist your business in managing the legal risks. Let us handle your labor matters, employment contracts, CCMA referrals, and so much more. Our team of professional lawyers are standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 42770. That's SAFM to 42770. Clientele General is an authorized FSP and licensed non-life insurer. T's and C's online. Standard rates apply.
Life is too short for long-term grudges, but when it's the Soweto Derby, Ayamadoda, Ipeli, Black and White confronts Gold and Black. The Buccaneers believe Yonkindao, Iparapaga, Yaphumelela, while Amakhosi still emphasize Ikosi, Alpelumoya. Experience Mzansi's biggest football rivalry, Orlando Pirates versus Kaizer Chiefs, on Saturday, 1 February at 2 p.m. live on SABC 1 and at 3:30 p.m. on SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda on SAFM. You're listening to the National Pulse. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Right, as always, let's get some feedback from you. You know, what we do is nowadays, sort of 10 to 5, 10 to 4, 10 to 5, 10 to 6, thereabouts, we have 3 blocks of audience engagement, which allows us to get more of your thoughts, more of your views, more of your opinions and advice and whatever it is that you want to talk about, whether it's a call or whether it's a text message or whether it's a WhatsApp voice note. Either way, we were able to pick up all of those things. So feel free to comment on those issues as well. Certainly one of the biggest issues we've had has got to be the issue of this of the bill that's been put together by the president, has now signed that into an act of law. I'm talking about Ramaphosa signing the expropriation bill into law, right? So we discussed it earlier on, and we touched on it earlier on. The law outlines how organs of state may expropriate land in the public interest for varied reasons. How will this address injustice of the past? I mean, would this be the type of redress we've been talking about? Let's get the thoughts of the president of the African Transformation Movement. That's Vuyo Zungula. Vuyo, thanks for connecting to us here on the National Pulse.
Thank you so much. Continue to yourself and the listeners.
Okay, so you've heard about now the president signing this expropriation bill into law. Your thoughts?
Firstly, you know, the sentiment when it comes to land was that exactly what we're saying, that it was all about correcting the wrongs of the past and the injustices of the past, where people were brutally murdered and removed from their land. Now, if you were to read the brief statement which details how land may be expropriated with compensation, because that is what this bill is saying, and it is something that is totally different from the public participation process which was held by Parliament, because Parliament, it is the law-making body of the country. And when Parliament was having public hearings, the people were very clear to say land expropriation without compensation. However, the whole part, as detailed by this statement issued by the President, is saying that, firstly, the expropriating authority may not expropriate property other than public purpose or for the public interest. And secondly, expropriation may not be exercised unless there's no success in attempting to reach an agreement with the owner or the holder of the property. Therefore, what we basically have here, Ashraf, is that the president is acting as if they are doing something, because all of what they has highlighted in this statement is currently in place. Because you'll recall that when the Gautrain was to be built, the very same principle was applied. So there's nothing new that the president has done here. And also, the biggest issue that we have is that there seems to be a policy capture in our country whereby the citizens, via the public participation process, are clear to say land expropriation without compensation. But what gets to be signed into law by the president does not speak to what the people duly express in those public participation processes.
So you're saying, if I understand you correctly, and I'm quoting the statement from the president, where they talk about Section 25 of the Constitution recognizes expropriation as an essential mechanism for the state to acquire someone's property for a public purpose or in the public interest, subject to just and equitable compensation being paid. So that we've discussed. That means there'll be a negotiation, ideally first, and then this expropriation will take place, provided it is in the public interest. You're saying, if I understand where you come from correctly, that this is not what you want. That expropriation has to be used as a vehicle or a tool to redress the imbalances of the past, and this one doesn't, because this one would be effectively like any wannabe property owner speculating in terms of what is in their interest and actually making an offer to a buyer, which is very different from saying we want to redress the imbalances of the past.
Indeed, there's two things. The first is that what's communicated here today is already in practice. Like I mentioned the example of the Gautrain. Yes. When the government entity wanted some of these houses or wanted the land, and some of the houses had to be demolished, the same principle was applied, whereby there was negotiation and there was settlement with the respective property owner, which is, there's nothing new. Then the biggest issue that we have is two things. The sentiment or the political debate regarding land, people were very clear to say it is all about correcting the injustices of the past. Now, what has been signed into law speaks nothing to that. And secondly, the government ought to be subject to the will of the people. And the will of the people was expressly communicated in the public hearings, because the public hearings were public for everyone to hear, and the people were overwhelmingly in favor of land expropriation without compensation for the sole purpose of correcting the injustices of the past. Now, what has been signed into law now is not giving effect to what the people wanted via those public participation.
You know, the big issue in all of this is, like, when we say the people, is like, how do we know what percentage of the people you are referring to?
Look, we are very, very privileged in the sense that there was a public hearing, because when a bill is taken to Parliament, a committee of Parliament takes the bill to the people via public hearings. They go to all provinces and all districts. Now, based on the inputs that were given there, the records can clearly show that the people were overwhelmingly in support of land expropriation without compensation. So it is not just political speak when we are saying this is the sentiment of the people. It is backed by empirical evidence as documented in those public hearings.
Okay, so with that in mind, why then do you think that the president of the country, the president of the ANC, and certainly the leader of the GNU, and I'm saying that very intentionally, then has gone this route?
It is basically policy capture. Policy capture in the sense that you've got citizens who communicate or express the policies that they want government to pursue, which is in this case land expropriation without compensation. But because the president and the respective parties in part of this GNU are somewhat influenced by other players, which are not the people, have taken a decision or have taken a policy direction which is contrary to what has been expressly communicated by the people. It speaks to that policy capture.
Okay, what happens next from your side? What can you do, you and those that would be supportive of your position want to do?
We are already in plans in motion in Parliament to deal with this issue by putting through proposals, because the first proposal, any discussion of land currently in terms of our legislation and the Constitution speaks of land expropriation from 1913, whereas it is our view that any discussion about land must start from 6 April 1652. And then the second thing should be, what is the intention? Because if the intention is to just willy-nilly expropriate land, then there's no justice. That is why on our side we are of the view that land must be returned to its original owners, and we are going to put through this and we're going to sponsor motions and bills in Parliament to give effect to what we've been saying.
And how far does that go? I mean, you quoted 1652. There are many private property owners all around the many cities and towns of this country that are owned privately. Then there are also other pieces of land that, I don't know, it could well be owned by the state right now, but even if that's not passed on to the people. So when you talk about the redress from 1652, give us a practical expression of that. What would that mean for someone listening?
There is documented evidence of people who are owning land or an area of land, particularly the Arab land or the lands whereby there were minerals, whereby there's documented evidence of those people being kicked out. And fortunately, those people were not just random people. It was a group of people, and whether it is Amahlobi, Amazulu, Bapedi, Botswana, which were working together and organized in a form of a certain tribe or a nation. So what we mean by correcting the wrongs of the past will be to retain the ownership of the land, because currently some of these lands, because the land that the people were moved off, it was the very rich land in terms of the minerals. And that land currently is owned by either mining companies or very, very rich individuals, which you can trace the land back to the people that were moved from.
So you're saying in a case like that where you can't trace it back to the original owners, I mean, it'll require extensive research, I understand that, right? Maybe you've done it already. You're saying in that case there must be a situation of expropriation, and you're saying expropriation without compensation, if I hear you correctly. Is that correct?
Indeed, because the people who are owning the land did not buy the land. They killed and brutally murdered people for them to occupy that land, so they cannot be paid for their killing of people.
Okay. What did you say about the counter narrative that, when it comes to, as you said, killing people to take over the land, that sort of, conquest and reconquest has been the norm, until the dawn of democracy. So, you can go back all the way, not just in South Africa, but around the world. That was the modus operandi of all these different peoples and tribes.
Justice trumps whatever consideration people may have, because without justice, we can't have a country, we cannot coexist, we can't move forward. And that is why even today, other countries are basically moving on when it comes to, in fact, implementing justice. You'll recall that when it comes, for example, to the discussion about the Holocaust and how, the people that were affected are very clear to say there was injustice on a certain group, and this is how there could be justice on that historical event. But when it comes to any injustices that have been effected on Africans, you find that there are creative ways to try and avoid any form of accountability and ensuring that justice is everyone does receive justice. So that is the issue that we have, that everywhere in the world you find that if it's the Caucasians that were on the receiving end of any injustice, that any fight or any pursuance of justice is well understood. But when it's Africans, there's always reasons to justify against that.
Okay, here's the last thing. I know your point earlier about expropriation of land without compensation in terms of where you find the historical conquest of that land. I got that. Now, at the moment, that doesn't appear to be the case at all. If, however, and I mean, here's the key part, right? In the public interest, if, for example, the government finds that it is in the public interest to actually expropriate land, right, as per, let's say, your brief, right, but the only difference is they will identify that land because it is in the public interest, but instead of without compensation, they would then go the compensation route anyway. Would you support that? It may be second prize, but would you support that?
If the government expropriates land without compensation for public interest, is that your question?
No, I'm saying for public interest, they would expropriate the land with compensation. Would you support that? It's your second prize, but would you support that?
I don't see how it would be in the public interest to reward people who are the beneficiaries of land which was taken through murder and the killing of our people. I don't see how that would be in the public interest.
Okay, and that last point from you may well be the basis of another whole conversation all throughout this show and tomorrow. It is the National Pulse. Vuyo Zungula, appreciate your time. The president of the African Transformation Movement. Does Vuyo Zungula have a point, or does the president have a point in signing the expropriation bill into law without compensation in this case here? I'm Ashraf Garda, and you are listening to the National Pulse.
The Market Update, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m.
Want to stay ahead of the financial game? Join us tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. for an insightful journey through the day's market developments, financial updates, and investment news. Tune in for your daily dose of financial intelligence as we navigate the twists and turns of the financial landscape with expert insights. Only on the SAFM Market Update.
SAFM Market Update with Jimmy Muyaha. Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
Right, we'll take your calls, by the way, in about 15 minutes or so, maybe slightly less, right? Let's get on to another issue. You may have seen this, the National Prosecuting Authority. In fact, they tweeted, besides what they may have done elsewhere, they tweeted about the fact that there's a person who's appeared in court on allegations of rape and giving the person's surname as well as Mbele, but then which would be fine because the person's appeared in court, but then linking it to say that person is the son of, and I'm paraphrasing, a high-profile actress and TV personality. And then, of course, many people very quickly circled back to saying exactly we know who it is, and spoke about the mother, and of course spoke about the father as well. So lots of things around that one there. I understand that now the NPA has now apologized to the actress Sonia Mbele for mentioning her in her son's case. Tsepo Motsebe is with me, the Managing Director of Reputation First. Tsepo, it's good talking to you. It's about time.
Yeah, good afternoon. Great to be here.
Absolutely. By the way, I get your WhatsApps every morning in terms of your Reputation First feedback or your whole condensing of news that matters to what you do in your company. So just as though I'm reading it, right? Anyway, let's get to this issue here, right? So help us understand what happened first so that we fully understand it. What did the NPA do first? Then there was a response, I take it. And then what have they done next? And then we talk about then the overall impact.
Yeah, so I think there was a statement that was issued, and that statement, the headline looked sensational. It looked like a tabloid headline, which implied, which labeled and referenced a specific person's mother. And then if you look at the article in detail, it actually, the media release, that statement actually mentioned the names, which was not necessary because they could have simply just reported on the matters that were in court and the outcomes of that, and then allow the media to take that statement and use it appropriately. And then they had to issue a retraction, so they've issued another statement. I think that it is dated the 22nd, in which they say, well, we now apologize for the statement that was issued earlier, and we shouldn't have, and we apologize to all the affected parties, and that is not in line with their values. But where it went fundamentally wrong, I believe, is referencing the name and the fact that they say it missed a fact-checking process or approval process or quality assurance process within the system. But the irony of it is that it's not the first time that they actually apologize for a statement. In fact, when you go to their website, the first media release that you see is an apology for something else, which was also fact-related. So it looks which was published by one of their regional managers. So it looks like while they may have a quality control process, it looks like regionally statements do creep through and end up in the media. And I find also that the writing of that article, as I say, seemed like it was a tabloid, which implies that the person who wrote it actually writes like a tabloid journalist, meaning that they're not necessarily applying the principles of communication science.
And there still is a big legal issue, and they're not speaking in legal speak. I mean, that's what you're saying, aren't they?
Firstly, not legal speak, but importantly, you don't have to speak legal speak when you write to the public. But at least at the minimum, you have to, the document has to be professional. The headline must be about the facts, the issue, because you are representing an entity and not your personal opinion. So I think the writer, the author, got caught up in their own view
in the drama.
Yeah.
So I mean, now we know that her son Donnell Mbele actually did appear in court on these charges of rape allegations. That, of course, will play out in court, and that's not why we're going to talk to you about it. So we know that, right? But let's talk then about the damage to. So first of all, I mean, it is uncommon that anybody would feel a need to link to another person, right? You mentioned. Once the person's appeared in court, you mentioned that name. It's for us to perhaps assume that we know who it is. I mean, is that correct? Sometimes we would assume by identification of the name. It's like, I wonder if it's so and so's relative, without even asking. But you're saying, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that's for us to decide. They can't make that call publicly because it's got nothing to do with her directly.
Yes, no, absolutely not. So you will notice that in KwaZulu-Natal, there are a few people who use the same name, Zuma.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the headlines recently, someone said Zuma fired from whatever region of that area, or from actually the MK party. But that headline was completely misleading and difficult, because when you say Zuma, the name former President Jacob Zuma comes up, and you are referencing the MK party. So the author could have easily mentioned the name, specified the name of the person to make it direct and easier. So the implications here is that the public begin to lose trust, but for the NPA, it actually looked also comical that the NPA would release such a statement. In fact, when I saw it, I thought it was a joke. That somebody else may have issued this, as a hoax or something along those lines.
So let's talk about then, circle back to where you sit in terms of reputation management. How damaging is this, firstly, to the reputation of the NPA?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the organization loses credibility in the context of the media, because mistakes do happen in newsrooms and in communication teams within organizations, but certain mistakes are not to be tolerable. And this is amateurish mistake. It creates an impression that there is no credible corporate communication team in that system. The second implication is that trust in the public may not necessarily trust in the capability of that organization, especially given the number of apologies that they issued. And as I say, when you go to their website, the first statement you see is an apology for another matter. But that matter was also explicitly wrong. And then it makes comic of the NPA. Already, if you look at social media comments, people are actually linking or associating the NPA with unprofessionalism, and which is a classic case of where you say our values are, but the behavior is completely opposed or different to what you say is your values and culture. The culture is very, very different. It looks like they don't have credibility. And that's a risk for such an important institution in a democracy.
Okay. What about then if anything, has there been reputation damage to Sonia Mbele? Firstly, only insofar as the NBA public announcement.
I mean, she could actually claim, yes, that there was because she was just directly linked to a story that honestly has absolutely nothing to do with her, because she was not involved in the event itself or the crime or the allegations. And so, yes, she may have suffered, but I think some reputation to an extent. But I think the fact that her son was involved in this matter was already a challenge. So it will be difficult for her to say I've suffered a reputation only because of the statement. I think the whole thing was already a matter of public discourse, but it is not for an institution or a company or an entity to articulate a statement in that fashion, making almost mockery of the process and the justice system, because it just really seemed like a big joke when I saw it, it was shocking. But I thought, well, this must be a hoax, and I'll have it checked and verified at a later stage, and really realized afterwards that actually this is it. So she may have suffered some negative coverage and some content, but I think the public has more empathy and sympathy towards her, and I think that the media has done the right thing to publish the correction and the retraction by the NPA. So the egg is actually not in her face; it's in the face of her.
Got that.
NPA.
Tsepo Matseba, thanks for your time. Managing Director of Reputation First. Quick thoughts we've got in terms of your comments. Much appreciate the SAFM team for taking up the plight of students who cannot or did not finish grades at school. They are lost completely. Much appreciated from Triple S. Ashraf, regarding the legalization of the Zama Zama illegal operations, some of these mine shafts have become unsafe and are too dangerous to access and to mine. Artisanal mining won't have the financial capacity and the safety expertise. And Solly saying, Ashraf, further to Yasmin Suka's submission earlier, the press and the media are just as guilty. Why don't you get Thabo Mbeki, while he's with us, let him explain what and why they made this deal not to prosecute, right? And just another one quickly, just wondering if the current matric examinations and pass mark percentages were to have been implemented by the racist apartheid government, would it have been perceived as, inverted commas, Bantu education? Food for thought coming from Naran Singh in Kwadakuza. Okay, 5:30, here's the news headlines with Greg Hose.
In the headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law the expropriation bill. The families of victims and survivors of apartheid-era crimes have called on the president to establish a commission of inquiry into political interference in the prosecution of cases from the TRC. And South Korea's former defense ministers told the court that he only expected martial law invoked by the country's president in December to last 2 or 3 days. I'll have a full update at 6 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Starting off in Gauteng, the N1 southbound and four-ways queuing towards Winnie Mandela Drive exit. The N3 northbound in Bedfordview is queuing on the link to the N12 east at Gilulis interchange. Bayes Nordier Drive in Honeydew is slow moving at Christian de Wet Road. The N1 northbound in Midrand queuing towards New Road, and the N4 Witbank Highway westbound in Pretoria has delays towards the N1 highway. In KZN, the N3 westbound as a crash reported before Cliffdale. All lanes are open. The N2 southbound is slow moving on the link to the N3 east at Spaghetti Junction, and Old North Coast Road is closed just north of Columbine Place. In Cape Town, the M5 southbound queuing towards Cromboom Road exit. The M3 southbound is slow moving towards Rhodes Drive. The M7 Jakes Hadwell Drive southbound slow moving towards the R300 highway, and you're asked to expect delays on local routes around DHL Stadium for tonight's Calabash concert event. With your traffic update, I'm Irma G.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Kapele.
Right, Timmy, you've got soccer to talk about. Amazulu.
They are in action, and they'll be looking to make it back-to-back victories in the Betway Premiership when they host wounded Stellenbosch FC at the Kings Welitini Stadium tonight. Amazulu have no suspension concerns, but they could be without Augustine Mulenga, who has been sidelined by a long-term injury since September 2024. And Stellenbosch, on the other hand, also do not have any suspension worries, but Bradley Mujela will be missing due to a season-ending injury. Kickoff is at 7:30 p.m. Elsewhere, Botswana have named South African born Morena Ramoribudi as the national team coach after having helped them secure a place in the Africa Cup of Nations finals later this year. Ramoribudi, who has taken Jwaneng Galaxy to the last two Botswana League titles, was a caretaker coach last November when the Zebras drew away in Egypt to qualify for the Cup of Nations for only a second time. And the BFA have set tough targets for him, which are progressing beyond the group stages at the Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco in December and collecting at least 12 points in the 2026 World Cup qualifiers, qualifying for CHAN 2026 and winning the 2025 COSAFA Senior Men's Challenge. Then the Europa League returns this evening with a series of exciting matches across Europe, featuring some high-profile clubs, including Manchester United, playing host to Rangers, and Tottenham Hotspur away to Hoffenheim. Now, the Red Devils and Rangers are vying to secure their place in the knockout stages. United sits in 7th place, while the Rangers are in 8th. Just 1 point separating them. And then Tottenham follows closely in 9th, just highlighting the competitive nature of the league, with positions 4th to 7th, all tightly contested. In tennis, Madison Keys beat Iga Swiatek to set up an Australian Open finals showdown with Aryna Sabalenka. Keys saved a match point before claiming a hard-fought 5-7, 6-1 and 7-6 win. And Swiatek's loss also means that Sabalenka will retain the world number 1 ranking after the tournament. In motorsport, Formula One drivers now face race bans if they repeatedly swear or criticize the sport's governing body under new rules introduced this year. So changes to the FIA's sporting code for the 2025 season codify the steps to a potential race ban for drivers deemed guilty of such offences. They mean that if a driver commits 3 such offences, they are at a risk of a 1-month suspension plus deduction of championship points. On that note, it is a wrap from my side. I'll be back again tomorrow.
All right, perfect. So you're going to watch football tonight, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and then tennis tomorrow, the men's, if you're going to wake up early. And then Saturday, Sunday, I know that. Semi-final and final days, of course, right? Okay, more sport from to me tomorrow.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Specsavers now looks after your hearing as well as your vision with Specsavers Audiology. With 60 stores and counting, we are South Africa's largest audiology group. For a limited time only, buy 1 rechargeable hearing aid and get 50% off the second. You heard right. Buy 1 rechargeable hearing aid and get 50% off the second. Find your nearest store at specsavers.co.za. Specsavers Audiology. Test your hearing and join the conversation. T's and C's apply.
Your best year starts at Dis-Chem with unbeatable deals on health foods for the whole family. Get 2+1 cheapest free on any Nature's Choice health products and get 20% instant discount on all health teas, hot drinks, honeys and spreads from brands such as Jacobs, Little B and more. Just swipe your benefit card at the till. Shop in-store and online for the lowest prices on the widest range of health foods. Now on until 16 February. Dis-Chem Pharmacies. Better health starts here.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Right, let's get to the SAFM market update, which comes up, by the way, 6 to 7. Jimmy Moyar hosted. Jimmy, as a scene setter, your moving markets, something about moving red. Tell me about that.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. Good afternoon to the listeners. It's a sea of red in terms of local markets. Not a good day for the local equity space markets. Actually, all our equity sectors closing out in the red. We'll get to that in a second. Let's first do a quick summary of what's coming up on the show today. We're going to be taking a look at a conversation around business rescue. We're going to be speaking to the team at Worksman's attorneys. The stats suggest that last year 1,400 businesses went into liquidation, and probably even more than that had business rescue proceedings ongoing. This is sparked by the developments that Murray and Roberts' South African unit has gone into business rescue, and that's such a big business, and we're looking at that. We're looking at what's been happening just in the space where companies find themselves in a bit of trouble and how they could potentially avoid that. Then we've got a conversation with MTN South Africa around a very interesting initiative they've put together with or through a partnership with Huawei and China Telecom. They're looking to launch the first and largest, I don't know if it's the first, but it might be the largest African smart mine, so combining 4 and 5G technology in the mining world. And I want to see what that's all about. I want to see how you do that and what the benefits of that might be. So we're going to speak to MTN South Africa around that. Then we've got a conversation with the Standard Bank Group around infrastructure development on the African continent. And then, because it's Thursday, we wrap up our Thursdays with an SME. And this week's SME is a particularly interesting one. It is an aquaponics farm. A gentleman has found a way to grow or to farm fish in Soweto. So that's going to be an interesting conversation to get into. But before we get to all of those, as I said, the markets have had a terrible day from the local perspective. But if we look at the international markets, they haven't fared much better. Asian markets would have been trading first. The Nikkei and the Shanghai main index were the only ones in the green. The Hong Kong Hang Seng and the ASX in Sydney were in the red. European markets, surprisingly, were all in the green, with the CAC 40 in France, the biggest gainer there, almost 0.5% in the green. The Nasdaq at the moment is down about 0.5%, with the S&P down about 0.8%. Local markets had a torrid day. Resources down 1%, financials down 1.6%, industrials the only kind of silver lining, but even they were in the red, down 0.15%. The all share down 0.84%. The top 40 down 0.83%. The rand at the moment giving back a bit of ground against all the major currencies, giving back about 0.25% against the dollar. 18 rand 56 is what $1 US will cost you. 1 British pound will cost you 22 rand 86, and 1 British pound will cost you, 1 British pound will cost you 22.86. 1 euro will cost you 19.29. 1 Australian dollar 11.64. 1 Bitcoin $104,000 or 1.946 million rand at current exchange rates. If we look at commodities, palladium back above $1,000 there at $1,010. Platinum $960 still, kind of where it was this time yesterday. And the gold price $2,745 a fine ounce. Brent crude still below $80, so still happy with that at $79.42 a barrel. I hope we go back to the days we were at $75 a barrel, so that potentially petrol prices don't continue to go up. But we'll be back with these and other stories a little later on. For now, Ashraf, back to you.
Thank you. Just give us a quick one on your masterclass about insider trading versus share incentive schemes.
They might seem similar, right? So insider trading is trading on inside information ahead of when it's supposed to be made public knowledge, and at a time where you have an advantage over other people, particularly the market, whereas a share incentive scheme is allowing you to trade during certain periods. Some companies have these open periods where they allow employees to trade on the shares, but some companies also do it as part of a compensation package. So you are allowed to buy the shares as part of your compensation package, or you're rewarded with the shares as part of a bonus structure. And that's distinctly different to trading on information that is not public knowledge, or information that is still considered confidential at the time you make those decisions. So in both cases, you might, yes, end up acquiring shares in a company, but the process that you went through are distinctly different. One gets you into a lot of trouble. The other one could potentially be a good retirement option.
Okay, perfect. You enjoy your show, 6 to 7, lots to talk about. And as you said, a sea of red or the Red Sea. Either way, we need to tune in there, right? Thanks for that, Jimmy. Let's get to your thoughts, as we don't just reflect the national pulse. I get to feel your pulse.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Right, let's get your opinions on whatever it is you want to get off your chest. What do you want to talk about? Mr. Pillay, first up in Durban. Hi.
Hi, that's a first time caller.
Well done. Congratulations.
I listen to SAFM all the time.
And I'm glad you finally called. Right, go for it. What do you want to get off your chest?
I'm having one issue that I'm like at a dead end. I had a vehicle that was registered on our name for 13 years.
Right.
I got all the licenses and everything with me. When I went to pay the license last year, they tell me this vehicle is no more on your name. It's on somebody else's name. The same number plate, same chassis number, everything. I can't understand how the native system allowed it.
Well, clearly, that clearly would be like cloning, because, sometimes you get someone who clones a car, so they haven't come to claim your car. I mean, you still have the car with you, right? That's the first thing.
I still have the vehicle with me.
Yeah. The danger is if sometimes people clone it to be able, but the danger, they sometimes clone it to do something wrong, and then when they do something wrong, the number plate links back to you. But now you're saying you can't use the vehicle.
Yeah, because it's not licensed. And if I go on the road, I'm going to get a ticket.
But so what did they advise you? What's your recourse when you complained about it? What did they tell you?
Well, they gave me some forms. They asked me to go to the police pound.
Yeah.
I took the vehicle there, and they gave me a clearance letter to say they're legitimate. And then I'm speaking to the investigating officer there, and I've been running around. It's 1 year now. Come February, it will be 1 year.
So you couldn't register it for 1 year since then, even after you went to the. to the police and you had an affidavit and you confirmed that you got a clearance and everything. Something is really strange.
Exactly. The lady at the police pound is telling me I must go and get a letter from the manufacturer. Now the manufacturer has left the country. They're overseas. I Googled them. They're no more in the country.
I think that's crazy. I tell you what, that's another story. Let's see. I'm going to get Keys to keep your number, and let's see if we can connect you to someone. Let's see if we can do so. I think it's an important issue, and it's ridiculous that it can just continue like this forever. Absolutely. Sorry about that, Mr. Pillay, but let's see if Keys can assist you in some way, or we can assist you. I'll get Keys to connect you. Thanks for that. Right, Lebo in Germiston, go for it.
Thank you so much,
Thank you. Right, you're not very clear, but let's try and hear you. Go for it.
Okay, yeah, I want to comment on the issue of the land issue that we were speaking about.
Okay.
More especially the issue of the starting date. How far do we go back? Saying 1652.
Yes.
And then when he went on speaking about the boys that spilled blood, but then we understand that there were black tribes that moved other black tribes during the Mfetane period. So who exactly will be the rightful owner, the right to claim the ownership of that land?
So your line is not very, very clear. I'm battling to pick up what you said in the last bit. Just try and repeat that last part.
Okay. I say if we go back to 1652.
Yeah.
We know there were the what came, but also there was this period where black people were fighting amongst each other.
Yes.
So when we decide the rightful owner, you are gonna say the ones who were removed by the Boers, or the ones that were, for example, Shaka replaced some of the people that were so Changan and them have to move and things like that.
Well,
and then,
yeah. Okay, I heard that part. Okay, so Lebo got that. That's exactly the point that I brought up. There's been one thing is like the settlers taking over your land. But the history of the world, there's been conquest after conquest of so many people. So how do we determine who the rightful owner of, let's say, a piece of land is concerned? But thanks for bringing it up, Lebo. Thanks for that. Rex in Leidenburg. Go for it, Rex.
Yeah, I said I could talk about anything, right?
Yeah?
Yeah, I know for a fact that Islam is a religion of peace and happiness for all people, for men, women, children, and their neighbors. That's the way it was for the first 400 or 500 years after the death of the Prophet. But then after that, things seem to go haywire. And I've never understood this conflict between the Sunnis and the Shias. I don't think anybody understands that. So because we had an election here a couple of months ago. We had major changes in government. Everybody accepted it.
Yeah.
So how many people have been killed in the Middle East since the Arab Spring, trying to do what we did in a week? Now, my question is it possible for somebody like yourself to create a safe space or a program on SAFM where people can phone in and ask the difficult questions? Because a lot of Muslims fought long and hard for democracy in this country. And I think we need a safe space where especially young Muslims can phone in and ask difficult questions. And I don't think that space exists in the mosque situation.
Well, I don't know.
Somewhere something's gone wrong.
Well, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of a community. I mean, I really can't,
Yeah.
okay? And I can't speak on behalf of... All I can tell you in terms of what you're talking about, you said Sunni and Shia, like, there's no difference to that, and I'm being just a one-liner, to different interpretations of religious expression within other religions. For example, you could get Orthodox Jews and others were not, and then you can get Catholics and Protestants. I mean, so that then plays out in the public spaces, and that plays out politically. But in terms of what they believe, I'm really not going to comment on that now. It's not my space to do so. Accepting, I mean, your point about safe space, I don't know. I mean, people think they have spaces. We can apply the same principle to everything, safe spaces, not so safe spaces. You've just raised your opinions and you have.
Yeah, but you see, I'm not a Jew and I'm not a Muslim. I don't live in the Middle East. But something's not right there. And I've lost lots of Muslims to explain what the conflict is. And they all tell you that those other guys are not proper Muslims, and then in the very next breath they'll blame it all on America and all on the Jews, and it never gets beyond that.
Well, accepting, I think you must accept there's a difference between religious differences and political differences. And maybe this is my last thought on this one. You forget the religious part of it. In terms of political meddling in the world, I mean, you must accept the fact there's meddling across the board, and it doesn't matter which religion we are talking about, across the board, okay? And that plays out geopolitically, and you can dot out 20, 30 countries. I'm not talking the USA, I'm talking about any other country. Just if you check it out, you will find it, including countries in Africa. I mean, go and see what's happening between Rwanda and the DRC. What I'm saying, there are just so many examples, and they're not just religiously inspired. Ultimately, they are politically inspired, and this is just one of them. Okay.
Being killed in the Middle East.
Thank you. Rex in Leidenberg, thanks for that call. Right, let's see. In fact, we've got a series of voice notes. Let's play some of them.
I also please ask your guests that if it was cut from a national point of view, couldn't they find the money at the Western Cape point of view? Because there's serious claims that Premier Aaron Winde used money for security and all other things that is not necessarily important, where they can use that budget for education. Can they not find money somewhere else? Or is it just a line in the sand whereby national doesn't have money and that's it? Because we have children in our public schools that have 100 kids, 90 kids, 80 kids per class. Something must be done. It's a pandemic. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ashraf. We may find ourselves in a bad situation in South Africa. Just imagine if those foreign inmates have to be sent back to their countries, and their countries, they don't convict them of any wrongdoing because of the different laws when it comes to countries. What if they don't find them guilty of something, or they can't afford to feed them in their prison and to release them? What if they may come back to the country and stress us again? So the government must build more prison. Prima by Protegland. Thanks for the great show.
Hi, Ashraf. It's Joseph here from Randbeck. I want to differ with the former CEO of Post Bank, who have been talking with you now regarding the issue of unemployment. Look, during apartheid, the reason why there was less unemployment in South Africa is because there were state-owned enterprises. You understand? There was railways which employ people, and now with this privatization thing, then that's why we will never get jobs, because all what they are looking for is to get profit instead of giving services to the people. Let's go back to the state-owned enterprises, and then you'll see jobs will start coming in.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you. I think there's a problem. The only reason privatization flourishes is when state-owned businesses or state-owned services effectively flop us. So then we try and find other things. I mean, think about one thing. Why do we have so many security companies in the country? Do you know they never existed maybe 30 odd years ago? They never existed. There was not one. Why do we have so many security companies? Because of a sense that people can't rely on the police, which is like state-owned versus private. So it'll flourish if the state-owned services mess up.
The Natal Rich Boys want to demonstrate their wealth with a win to reach the last 16. But the Buccaneers say they will illustrate why they are the reigning champions. This is the Nedbank Cup round of 32. Richards Bay FC battles it out with Orlando Pirates FC this Sunday, 26 January at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Hi, I'm Khomotso KG Mweketi, and I believe in music's ability to connect, to heal, to remind, and to bring joy. And each week on my Saturday and Sunday show Seasons right here on SAFM, I endeavor to do just that. So join the movement of Seasons every Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's addictive. You might invite a friend. Seasons, only on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide with me, KG Mweketi.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
And you know, that caller from regarding schooling and talked about it like this pandemic, right, about education. I mean, in the same breath, going to the last call about privatization, it's linked. I can tell you now, there are so many government institutes, departments, that they've had budget cuts, that they've got no money. When they say they have no money, believe them, they have no money. It's not in their interest to be able to under-deliver, but there's no money. We had this chat with the Minister of Health, remember 2 weeks ago. Listen to that podcast, just go to our website, you'll find it, where he's like, yes, we can't hire these doctors, 500 or so, because we have no money. So when teachers, when education departments get budget cuts, and that does mean there's less people, why would they deliberately blast 2,000 teachers willy-nilly to put pressure? They've got no money. And the same would apply to other parts of the country. We have a serious problem in terms of our revenues are so low, there's massive budget cuts. And when you have budget cuts, we are compromised. No question about that. Temba in the Northwest, go for it.
Ashraf, how are you?
I'm good indeed, right? What's your point?
Ashraf, I've got a problem, a very, very big problem, a serious one. Here where I stay in Chusei, there is always air pollution here. And then in the evening, I get air which is burning my skin, and in the mornings also, about 5 o'clock in the morning. So who's in charge of the air pollution, especially in the north, in the Lekhno area? Where can I report this thing?
Who's in charge of pollution in the Northwest area? Goodness, I'm going to refer you back to Keys, because at the moment, like, everything is going to Keys and Temba, right? Let me put you to him. Let's see if we can find out about who do you complain about air pollution. Maybe we can find out that as a story and amplify that if it's warranted as well. Temba, thanks for that call. Right, let's get your thoughts. There's more comments from you.
Ashraf, Mark Barnes is easily talking about, and very fluently talking about, those who must give jobs. But you know what? They don't even give you the opportunity to just sit in for a day to experience or to get the feel of the environment that you are in or interested in. And we're not asking for a stipend. We're just asking for a couple of hours in a day, just one day, just to get the feel of that space. So yeah, they just refuse to give you the opportunities. Teresa, Cape Town.
Afternoon, Ashraf. Listening to your guests. Your guest here, agreeing with him until he says after matric, go work somewhere and then get a sense of what the real world is like. Go work somewhere where in South Africa, because if that somewhere was available, then an adult, fully fledged adult with kids and responsibilities would be working there. I get what he means, I agree with his sentiments, but a tad bit detached from reality.
Hi, Ashraf, it's Kafiso from Mafike. Look, people who are saying these foreign nationals who have committed crime and convicted in South Africa should be sent back to their countries. I think they are not taking into consideration the fact that laws are different, per country. So what is illegal in South Africa might not necessarily be illegal in Zimbabwe. That's number two. And punishment also differs, In Botswana, there was a case in the past where a guy, was convicted for being an illegal immigrant, and they sentenced him to, lashes. So what happens in that situation? That the punishment is not condoned by the Constitution of South Africa. For example, if you've killed a person, you go to Zimbabwe, they say you need to be killed. What must happen in that situation? I think it's going to be a very complicated one for our country to deal with.
Well, I think you're right. It is complicated. I mean, your example is spot on. But the country does have a serious problem about just too many, as was discussed yesterday, foreign nationals in prison. I'm not talking about others. And then subsidizing them in terms of even being in prison. I mean, just work it out. Let me get my facts right. I mean, if the minimum wage is like, depends on where you are, but let's say it's 4.5, just under 5,000 rands a month. If you're paying 480 odd per day for a prisoner for their meals, that's like over 10,000 rands. Can you see that mismatch? There's something wrong there. The point from Teresa about the spaces, I mean, you're right. That is why I often talk about having a seat at the table. We must fundamentally together try and make every effort we can to try and ensure that people get a seat at the table. It's just absolutely fundamental. Just two quick comments I've got from others. Ashraf, the impounding of vehicles is just a daylight robbery and a revenue-creating opportunity. The public should be aware that compounding is suspended, but this information will not be timelessly disseminated. From Tabo in Mabopani. And the last one, Ashraf, it's Tommy in East London. I'm saying it again. This country is a banana republic. Police are assisting criminals to escape. Police are taking bribes every day. They even still have money that is under their guard. What else can one dispute these facts? South Africa is a shame of a country. Right, we've got 45 seconds from Sibonelo in Umlazi. We want to talk about privatization. Go for it.
Sir, I won't lie to you. This is going to sound controversial, but we all know that the Constitution has a problem. It was designed as a transitional legal framework, not to be permanent. Now, the actual law in itself, the Constitution, we now started applying it as a permanent fixture. That's why we are where we are. Government institutions have people who are ill-equipped, who are untrained. And then you find that most of the time, we can't even rely on them. The police service, we can't rely on them. The Home Affairs, we can't rely on them. Then there's a total breakdown. But the Constitution, that's where the problem starts, which is it was not supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be a transitional tool from the old government to the new government.
Okay.
And then we change it and implement a one that would be inclusive of everyone.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there because we're on to news time, but you've certainly got us thinking. Government institutions, untrained, ill-equipped. Should we be having that conversation tomorrow? Maybe, just maybe. Are we really that bad? Ill-equipped, untrained. This is the National Pulse. Feel free to connect, by the way, even after the show. Just tag us, SAFM Radio, and myself, Ashraf Garda, with the hashtag the National Pulse, because what you feel that impacts on the pulse of the nation happens 24/7. You know that. We'll do it again tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Let's get the news with Greg House.
Thank you again, Ashraf. In this news update, call for probe into TRC prosecutions, and Ramaphosa signs the expropriation bill. Good evening. The families of victims and survivors of apartheid-era crimes have called on the president to establish a commission of inquiry into political interference in the prosecution of cases from the TRC.